Flower, Sun, and Rain is an adventure game that describes a tale of not only murder and mystery, but absolute intrigue and tests of reality in this secluded paradise. Developed by a Grasshopper manufacturer and released for the PlayStation 2 exclusively in Japan back in 2001, it received a demake of sorts for the Nintendo DS about 7 years later, which saw a more global release. Directed and designed by Suda51, with the story written between the same three writers of The Silver Case, which include Masahi Uka and Sako Kato. This alluring tale of a mystified terrorist plot on the tropical island of Lost Pass remains as one of a kind to this day. If you haven't seen my analysis for The Silver Case, or at least played both that and Flower, Sun, and Rain in their entirety yourself, I suggest you go back and do so. Worlds concocted by Suda and his gang continue to intertwine as we dive into a mission to stop a terrorist scheme. Of course, this task won't be accomplished by a brute with a big gun, instead a modest man with the profession of searcher and his little silver case. While the game was originally released on PlayStation 2, it feels perfect on the Nintendo DS. Not only are the controls very simple for an adventure game, utilizing only a few buttons, it even lets you play the entire game with the touchscreen, besides this one instance. But it isn't just simplicity of the game that makes it a good fit for the Nintendo DS. This game, 1000%, is perfect to play on a nice warm beach on a sunny day with an ice-cold mojito. Well, I guess it'd be fine on the PSP as well. Of course, something else worth considering is that Flower, Sun, and Rain was made in 2001. Like many games around this time, this adventure is glazed with this beachside sunny aesthetic that was running rampant during the beginning of the 6th generation. It's probably my favorite aesthetic, and like many games that were part of this Y2K era, it's spread across the gaming sphere like the sun's rays across the beach on a cloudless day. When it came to a lot of these games, the choice of tropical areas and beachside came from the updated technology, becoming capable of providing great in-game water physics. It was how the devs excused using them more with those kinds of settings. But for Suda51, his desire for the tropics came from reflecting on Grasshopper's first finished project, The Silver Case.
I had to fully put myself into Silver Case's world, which is dark and pretty fucked up. By the time I finished, with everything being dark for so long, I kind of felt like I wanted to go to an island paradise or something. And since I can't actually swim, I thought, okay, I'll make a game about it. It was something that was close to the opposite of The Silver Case, something bright and kind of funny at times.
I think this mentality of having himself, and by extension the player, take a vacation of sorts speaks for the presentation of this game, the narrative, and its core mechanics. There's no interactive action, no bad guys to kill. You're mostly just expected to walk around, talk to folks, feverishly read through your island guide, and take in the atmosphere with this serene yet confounding story. So, as per the dry Ghenry recipe, I will start going through the story and describe each chapter while sharing my observations and analyzing the narrative as we go. I choose to do this because I believe a lot of people tend to leave this game severely confused, so perhaps if we look through the story and lay everything out flat, it'll be easier to comprehend, right? This also won't be as heavy as The Silver Case, so we should be able to have a lot more fun. I'll do my best not to be too descriptive. After all, I expect everyone watching to have actually played through Flower, Sun, and Rain at least once. Not just so you can take the story fresh on your own, but also because it's really funny. The humor of this game is arguably the best regarding Grasshopper's library. In fact, I consider this to be their funniest game with few challengers. However, the comedy is something I can't, or in some ways won't, really show off in this video, mainly due to the dialogue being all text. And I don't think me explaining what they're saying is always going to do the bits and gags justice. So, spoilers from here on out. Of course, I'll go into analytical detail and theorizing when I feel appropriate. As expected from Suda's directed projects, there's a lot of underlying meaning in the narrative that I find deeply interesting. I'm also using the European version of the port, as its translation is at least slightly more accurate to the original script. But I'll point out some differences between this and the US version as we go. Also, just because I can't really fit this anywhere else, another unique aspect to this game is the soundtrack. Masafumi Takada was head composer once again, who would work along with Jun Fukuda and Shingo Yasumoto. What made Flower, Sun, and Rain's soundtrack so different from every other game in Grasshopper's library, even to this day, is the majority of it consists of royalty-free classical songs recomposed and mixed by Takada and the gang. How each song is played into the game, original or otherwise, feels perfect for each room and scenario. And even if you are familiar with the songs beforehand, the way many of them are performed here are wholly unique. We'll talk more about the individual royalty-free songs as we analyze the story, but I'll warn you now, I'm not a music expert. Speaking purely on vibes, folks. And I'm opting for the original versions that were on PlayStation 2, not the scaled-down compositions from the DS remake. But enough with the delay, let's get into the game already. Flower, Sun, and Rain starts with a beautiful intro movie, although the song was changed in the DS port in a form I can only describe as the aftermath of a machine press video. What you're watching now is from the PS2 version and shows not just in-game footage, but live action representations of Sumio and Toriko, two of the main characters. Oh, and I think Yoyoi? Names that'll mean more to you as we go on. I adore the scenery of these shots, showcasing the tropical area, which was shot in Saipan, a part of the Northern Mariana Islands. The music video was shot and directed by unnamed filmmakers from the island. Suda claimed he did not have a good time working with them during the shooting process.
The shots were filmed in Saipan. I went there personally. It was terrible. The production house that was entrusted with making the videos was made up of around 10 people living on site. Prejudices about video games are still very present among videographers.
From what he's saying here, it sounds like the videographers didn't really respect that they were shooting this for a video game. Still, it came out nice. I love this intro. It looks like absolute paradise. But observing the characters and how they're emoting, you can't help but feel this sense of uncertainty, doubt, dread. These folks are in the middle of paradise, but rest and relaxation seem to be the last things on their mind. The lyrics to the song were written by Suda51, and there are verses that emphasize the fleeting time of those pleasant days. Days where you're relieved of stress and responsibilities. No matter how long it lasts, it just never feels like enough. Things like flowers and the sun representing this pleasantness, but the rain is here to put an end to all of that. As you'll soon see, this is all relevant to the story at hand. Request 0. Welcome to the Flower, Sun, and Rain. The prologue chapter starts with Sumio Mondo driving down a highway and spiel directly towards you, the player. Huh, that's familiar, isn't it?
I know a lot of gamers out there don't have much patience. At least that's what Bishop, the dude at the video store, said. So I'm at the register, and then I realized I got no money. I was seriously broke.
A searcher by trade, he gets hired to find something. Which is kind of a weird profession, don't you think? I know there's detectives and private investigators. Why doesn't he just go by one of those titles? I suppose it's for his somewhat less conventional means of finding the truth. How that's the case, you'll soon see. We cut to a mysterious long-haired man entering a restroom. The dude goes into one of the stalls and that's it. Back to Sumio, who reaches the lot and parks like a total asshole. You're not even on the spot, man. Near his feet is a lost and found report notepad. This is a series of new puzzles added to the DS remake, which can be found in almost every chapter. Suda has commented time and again that a proper re-whatever of Flower, Sun, and Rain is something he intends to do eventually, but to this day, there has not been any official announcement. The reason I bring this up is because I'm willing to bet 100 LB dollars that these lost and found puzzles won't be included in said re-thing. The puzzles themselves add nothing to the world building, but they do unlock descriptions of the characters. something that should just be included after finishing the story if we're talking remaster stuff. Because of this, we're gonna ignore these puzzles for the actual analysis. Maybe we'll have some fun with the costumes later. Moving on. Well, time to stop ignoring the elephant in the room. Right from the start, you can't help but notice the rough visuals. Considering how much of this was scaled down for the DS, I can imagine the litany of compromises the graphic designers had to go through. Although, even the PS2 version had considerably underwhelming graphics for its time. Think back to the year 2001 if you can. The PlayStation 2 was that brand new piece on the street, making insane waves in Japan as well as the US, and developers were dishing out games with stellar art style and graphical fidelity that pushed the console to its early limits. From Capcom, Onimusha, Square, Final Fantasy X, Konami, Silent Hill 2, well, later in the year, Namco, Tekken Tag Tournament. These games would also give a lot of attention to the character models themselves, since they'd be what most players would focus on throughout their experience. A lot of what these games provided visually are still impressive to this day. Then you look at Flower, Sun, and Rain, which came out around the same time, and yeah, it's a bit awkward.
Each game has its own artistic direction, and making everything look beautiful is not Grasshopper's style. The staff in charge of the models also had quite some trouble with the fierce competition of the PS2 age. The moment where the models and the backgrounds were displayed, they were certain the models they had chosen were the best option.
Hey, at least it runs at 60 FPS. Well, for PS2. Everything got scaled down for the DS version, naturally. The textures are probably the biggest blight. A lot of them look stretched to shit and murky. Of course, I'm also capturing all of these games on an emulator with some finessing to give it a cleaner resolution, so that certainly does not help this game's case. With that, please ignore the visual flubs, as these inconsistencies were hard to notice on actual DS hardware. Of course, I also feel like the low polys and such of this game are part of the experience, and if you watched my prelude video, you'll understand what I mean. I stuffed that entire discussion in there, as well as explained why I do not want a remake of this game, but instead a proper remaster or port of the PS2 version. So check it out if you haven't. Let's get back to it. There's a huge semi-truck in the parking lot, accompanied by a rotund man, Peter Bockwinker. He says he's from the Commission, which I suppose could be some sort of police network. Perhaps they're the ones that gave Sumio this job in the first place. Sumio agrees to give him 5% of what he'll earn before Peter asks to, jack into him. Sumio knows what you're thinking already. He explains how Catherine, his silver case, works. While he figures out the solutions himself, he needs Catherine in order to complete these problems. Sumio then pontificates his heroic declaration to solving mysteries. This plays every time you get ready to solve a story puzzle. I have no doubt this is an homage to tokusatsu heroes who often perform similar showmanship when about to face a challenge or villain, complete with the dramatic camera shifts. Garcia had a similar knack when confronting threats in Shadows of the Damned.
Before you die, demon scum, I will carve my name into your flesh. That name is Garcia Hotspur, hunter of demons and slayer of cabrons like you!
I figure I can encapsulate all the gameplay talk here and even discuss the presentation, since now we have seen nearly everything you are capable of doing throughout the entire adventure. You walk around, see who you can talk to or what you can interact with, and solve a puzzle or riddle in which the answer is usually found somewhere inside this in-game guidebook. All answers are numeric too. No health bar, no inventory system, no UI, well, except for the bottom screen I guess, no lives, no action. This is pretty much the entire game. You stick some plugs into all sorts of things, and even people, then dial an answer in order to make progress. Exciting stuff. I like Catherine's mess of cables and plugs. It reminds me of how various tech companies around the time were trying to peddle any sort of doohickey that serves as a utility for multiple services. A rickety, messy step towards the simplification of technology that we'd come to see in the real world.
With Flower, Sun, and Rain, I wanted to break things down into something more simple. Instead of doing all these different puzzles that are unrelated thematically, it would have the same type of puzzle throughout the game, so I went with a numerical system for that instead.
Now, regarding presentation, it's obvious that this is much different from the Silver Case. No longer in first person, everyone is represented by a 3D model in real time rather than empty venues and 2D portraits. And of course, instead of a mute self-insert of sorts, you're playing as a specific character with tons of personality. The two games still have a lot in common regarding presentation, such as the character portraits and text boxes, although there are now garbled voice bites in lieu of typing text sounds, something the Western versions of Killer 7 would adopt years later. The portrait and text placements were kept simple for the sake of consistency, as this game is now utilizing 3D models and the environments to represent everyone and whatever is happening in the scene. My guess is they didn't feel the need to be as stylish with the portraits and text this time around, since this is more of a traditional looking adventure game. No need to distract the player from the 3D models they were able to afford this time around. After giving Peter your birthday, he welcomes us to Los Paz Island. Sumio heads to the gate, noting the statue of a baby on top of this pillar. Perhaps a sign of rebirth? The correct answer is the birthday you input, but backwards, as Sumio strongly implied.
Nice work, Mondo. Now we can head for the hotel. But this island is a green zone. No cars from the outside can be used. It's a pain, but we'll have to take my truck.
What about gigs?
I can't hear you. Speak up.
What about my beloved car?
Huh? You're too far away. Shut up. Just get in the truck, Mondo.
But gigs!
We got a long road ahead of us. 2 hours each way. Such a weird exchange.
Peter drives us down the long road to get to the hotel. He tells him about Ito McAllister, whom Sumio is not familiar with. He promises to see Peter again once the job is done before he drives off. Inside the hotel lobby, Ito greets Sumio, and it turns out he's the one that hired him. As he tells him more about Los Paz and the significance to its name, we receive a tourist guidebook and learn the island's location is within a unique magnetic field which warps time as we know it to a complete standstill. So he says. Ito also tells Sumio about a terrorist plot that involves the rigging of planes to explode. He wants Sumio to use his searcher skills in order to sniff them out. With that said, Ito shows Sumio to his room and the chapter ends with a second introduction video showcasing this tropical island and its emphasis on the warped sense of time. We also get a flurry of quick intro cards to just about all the characters you'll come across. Tons of mysteries are left to be solved in this beautiful island of Los Paz. Not too much to say about this introduction chapter, but it certainly serves as a taste of what's to come with this unique assortment of characters, strange puzzles, and almost heavenly atmosphere in the secluded tropics. Even in the lowest of polys, it's hard not to immediately start falling in love with this island of serenity, accompanied by fitting music, both original and royalty-free classical. Anyway, before we get deeper into this, I wanted to plug a special book coming soon. Lost in Cult, an award-winning company that specializes in writing and publishing books centered around video games, is creating the definitive history book of our favorite game studio. Kill the Past, 25 years of Grasshopper manufacture. The quarter century of Grasshopper's existence will be contained in this book of over 400 pages, including never-before-seen concept art, tons of behind-the-scenes production stories of their past games, and brand new interviews with Suda51, Shinji Mikami, Tadayuki Nomaru, as well as other essential creatives behind Grasshopper's most iconic games. There's a standard edition for the book itself, but also a gorgeous looking deluxe edition that includes essays on individual games by acclaimed writers covering titles like The Silver Case and No More Heroes. Other goodies include posters, badge pins, and stickers. Pre-orders are live right now and ends on October 18th. Act now, because this book is already shaping up to be a must-have for fans of Grasshopper manufacture. Lost in Cult also ships worldwide, so don't miss out. I already know it's going to be a wild read, so check out their site through the link below, or lostincult.co.uk. Request 1. Gymnopedy number 1. Sumio wakes up. Ito calls him on his room phone while he's fast asleep, reminding us the urgency of his mission. Sumio starts his day with a fresh cup of coffee, expressing suspicions he has of Ito. He attempts to leave the room, but the door won't open. He heads back to the bedroom in order to use the phone, only to see the whole place is completely transformed. Within these dark walls are a couple chairs, a camera, and a peephole in the wall. Through here, he sees two women. One introduces herself as Sue, a housekeeper for the hotel. The other woman is rambling about some evil curse that has invaded our room. She goes by Sister Phantom. Sue says you're in a sealed space, but that Sister Phantom is a medium and can help him out, which she doesn't, ditching Sumio as he observes this strange layout. After a lot of back and forth with Sue, she tells us to look inside the guidebook to learn more about the chair and camera invading our room. After a bit of teasing the player with the guidebook viewing feature, Sumio approaches the camera, spills his monologue, and begins the puzzle. Which isn't a puzzle, you just find the page that's about a photo camera. Here we have the Bic A. Since this is the first puzzle utilizing the guidebook Sumio received, I want to talk a bit more about it. For both the original PS2 version, you can only go through the guidebook when accessing a puzzle. On DS, it can also be accessed through the pause menu as well, that being Catherine herself. It's not very intuitive. I don't like the format very much, at least not in English. Rather than recreating all these tasteful pages into English, they just have a transcript obscuring all the pages, so it kind of makes thumbing through the guidebook feel even more like a slog, and in turn makes some visual cues harder to notice. It's just not good, but I don't think HAND had much of a choice. Unless they did something like make you turn the DS sideways, sort of like Brain Age, but that might not even be a good solution. They were very limited on resolution and screen real estate, you know? But back in 2001, with the release of the PS2 version, stores also sold a physical guidebook. So while Sumio is sitting there waiting to solve the puzzle, you in real life can flip through it yourself. I love this idea, as it accentuates how often Suda likes to integrate the actual player of the game into his stories. It also serves as a cheeky homage to players' guides to adventure games, a lost art. Remember those? Prima and Brady Games were the two big publishers back then, making strategy guides that advertise how it's got all the info and advice you'll ever need to complete whatever game is on the cover. For all intents and purposes, the Los Pass guidebook was a player's guide and considerably mandatory to use in order to complete the game and even understand parts of the story. While all the copies contained the digital guide, the physical book itself would be so much easier to flip through while you're staring at the panel, seeing how many numbers you need to press. It's hard to replicate this experience now, and not just for English players. The guide itself is rare and goes for exorbitant prices these days, and it's only in Japanese. Although, fans have provided complete translations of the guide on the book itself. I'll link the one I prefer in the description. If there were ever to be a remaster of this game, I pray that they'll republish the same guide and provide it in English. Make it a special edition bundle or something. That would make sense, right? Anyway, back to the puzzle. We're looking at a photo journal of sorts from a previous hotel guest. Among the various photos, one has a girl sitting in a chair. You're supposed to decipher it's the same chair invading your room. You take a look at the corresponding settings, punch those numbers in, and everything is back to normal. Sumio leaves his room to meet up with Sue, and Sister Phantom comes back to rant about evil spirits. She says these entities can be birthed from those with hearts of evil, people with darkness festering inside of them. She strongly infers it was Sumio Mondo himself that brought this evil upon his room, but within it is also kindness. I think the most important thing to take away from Sister Phantom's premonitions is that this hotel, this island, something about it was calling to Sumio, that it needs him for something. After that, she makes her exit. Sumio speaks with Ito again and goes to the veranda of his room to admire the beautiful view. And with that, Chapter 1 has ended. The biggest takeaway, I think, isn't just the paranormal activity that invaded Sumio's room, but that it was Sumio's own spirit that lured it into this place. Sister Phantom, despite being such a small character that's literally gone after this scenario, is foreshadowing a lot of narrative pieces that'll come together much later. We also witnessed the first of many plane explosions in this game. Some people theorize the terrorist plot and the visual of exploding planes sealed away any chance of the PS2 version seeing a worldwide release, what with the September 11th attacks happening that same year, but nobody at Grasshopper has ever stated this was the case. Although it is a fair assumption to make, some games around this time saw changes that would remove imagery where the developers felt it could dredge up those bad memories and possibly cause some bad PR. The majority of those chapters within the game involve Sumio helping random people dwelling in Los Pass, many which you only communicate with that one time before they're gone forever. With that said, I think this chapter is hinting at what Sumio needs to be doing with his life, and that there's a reason the likes of Sue and Sister Phantom didn't really offer much help. There's a quote that goes something like, "You can't really help others until you help yourself." And that's what Sumio's doing here before he can get to solving other people's problems throughout his trip here in paradise. Nearly all of the chapters are named after a classical song that appears somewhere within said chapter, and this one is probably the most popular among fans. It even played during Ito's cameo in Killer 7. So, while I can't analyze these songs the same way I could for all the song titles featured at the end of the Silver Cases chapters, I can at least pick bits from what I feel is being evoked in these compositions, or perhaps even their original history. So, Gymnopédie is French, and derived from the word gymnopedia, I'm probably not even saying these right, which itself was the title of an ancient Spartan tradition where dudes danced, sang, and did other activities completely naked. But I don't think that's relevant. In fact, it's still kind of a mystery why the original composer, Eric Satie, gave it that name in the first place. But what's most important, I think, is just how dreamy and serene the song sounds. Its calm, simple, and gentle nature accentuate the feeling of Los Pass Island very well. Well, when you aren't panic-locked inside your room with no way out, at least. Request 2, Air in G. Sumio wakes up. He thinks the previous day was only a dream, even mentioning the plane explosion at the end. Part of him feels like none of that ever actually happened. Shortly after his morning coffee, Ito calls to connect him with Stephen Charbonny, another guest of the hotel. He goes on about inspiration, spiritual shit, all kinds of nonsense, which leaves Sumio just as confused as us. Steven then assigns him a fetch quest for his suitcase before hanging up. Rude. Sumio decides to ignore the request and start heading for the lobby, but one of the housekeepers dropped their cart down the stairs, blocking the way. They notice a bag shaped like a soccer ball. Sumio suspects it belongs to the Steven fellow, and Maddie offers to bring it to his room while letting Sumio know that Ito is actually on the rooftop bar. Heading there, a phone nearby rings and he decides to answer. It's Steven, and he's mad that we didn't bring that soccer bag ourselves. He babbles about some Roman shit. Just what I need. Another Frenchie shouting at our protagonist over the phone.
Take a hit, you impotent dipshit!
He mentions a woman named Yoyoi, ending his spiel with La Vita Continua. Sumio talks to a woman sunbathing nearby. She must be Yoyoi, as she has quite the take on our buddy Steven. Oh fuck, is his name Stefan?
But because you have an A there, well, it's most generally Stefan.
She says Stefan's been here for 3 months, an oddly long stay at a hotel. She seems to know Italian, letting us know that La Vita Continua means life goes on. The goddamn silver case theme song starts blaring from her cell phone. It's Steven. Fuck, it's Stefan. He keeps talking about the trecarista, which is a soccer position that requires 4 players. Basically, Stefan is treating this entire thing like a game and sees Sumio, Yayoi, Ito, and possibly himself as these 4 players, his bag being the ball. Yayoi catches on to this as well. Sumio talks to Ito at the bar, asking about the Italian phrase, which Ito recalls being said by a famous soccer player named Alberto Ferrante. He is based on a real-life soccer player named Roberto Baggio, as much of this little story actually happened. After missing that penalty kick and losing the final World Cup match of 1994, all the fictional Ferrante said was, "Life goes on," just before his country's kingpin put a hit out on him for losing the game. Just kidding, this wasn't the Colombian team. Why they changed his name for the dialogue, I'm not sure. I also couldn't really find a reliable source that the real-life athlete ever said that after missing the shot. Ito tells us more about Stefan and also hints Sumio about a soccer page in the guidebook. After one last chat with Yayoi, oh my goodness! We talk to Ito for a bit more information on soccer positioning, and finally head to room 404 to find the soccer bag on the table. As we start the puzzle, it's time to look through the guidebook and find this page. Man, I can't with this shit. I don't really do sports, you know? Last time I even played soccer was in some shit league as a little shit because my newly divorced dad at the time guilt-tripped me into it, and I played in this league for a long-ass time. It felt like, I think it was like for a year. All of my Saturday mornings were ruined while I was in this league. I was terrible too. I definitely put the bare minimum in any practice sessions. I never scored a goal. I sucked at defending. I wasn't even a good goalie, the most stationary position. I even recall a couple times where I tried to tell my dad I didn't want to be in the soccer league anymore. I think I was like 8. I wanted to do anything else with my Saturday mornings, but he coerced me to stick with it somehow. I don't think it's very hard to manipulate a small child. It all came crashing down when, in the middle of a game, the ball got launched by a perfect pendulum leg from another kid, shooting it off like a rocket, nailing me dead center at my face. The impact knocked me on my ass and my nose was bleeding. I was crying. It hurt like hell. I was taken out of the game immediately. I didn't even stick around for the end. We left real fast after I got checked out. And as I sobbed in the car, I screamed at my dad, "I don't want to play soccer anymore. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much." Through my tears and woes, my dad drove me home, silent as a mouse, explained what happened to my mom, and we never spoke of that horrible fucking soccer league ever again. I've literally never done so much as kick a soccer ball since that day. Got into bowling for a while though. Anyway, this puzzle is easy if you've been paying attention. Stefan, Yayoi, and Ito all talked about the trequartista position and how it involves 4 players. There's only 2 formations here that involve 4, and one of them comes from Italy. La vita continua. As we have solved the puzzle, Stefan calls and says he played this game of carrot and stick to try inspiring Sumio. This infuriates him, and in a fit of rage, punts that damn bag right out of the field. Holy moly, that ball was on its way to the stratosphere before the goddamn thing shoots directly at a passing plane and... Oops. So, you might have noticed Sumio got just a smidge closer to actually leaving the hotel. This is the most blatant sense of visual progress in the adventure. Just about every chapter in the game has you get closer and closer to your destination, but there's always something blocking your way. Stefan might be the closest thing we have to a villain so far, speaking in tongues, toying with Sumio's patience, and aggravating him more than anyone else has so far. There's also Yayoi Hanayama, which may have surprised a few players back in Japan. She has a strong resemblance to Yayoi Itsushima, a supporting character from Moonlight Syndrome. While she has a different last name, Suda considers them one and the same.
I'm very attached to Yayoi, so I brought her back. I wanted her to interact more with Sumio, but she would have to stay put in a peaceful place like Paradise, and Yayoi is at her best in a city environment. I hope she'll show up in another game in the future.
Even without a statement by Suda, it's a safe assumption to make considering they have similar body types and are both sporting the same beauty mark. Moonlight Syndrome has yet to receive a full proper translation in playable form, so that's about all I want to say regarding this connection right now. I don't feel the need to discuss her character further, but we'll say it's interesting to see her seemingly make a return for a game by Suda years later, accentuating her importance to him. But hey, what better place to plug the Moonlight Syndrome translation ISO project? Led by Griffith 8, a group known as Team Lunatics 51 are working on a fully playable build of the game in both English and Spanish. They even released a demo you can download. Please check out the links below and look forward to it. I commend the fine people behind this project, and I guess this means I have to review the game eventually, huh? Moving on. The title of the chapter is called Air in G, which is based off of Air on the G String by Bach. I could only guess this name was changed because of how wildly different Takata's rendition sounds from the original song. From my understanding, Bach originally titled this song Air, and that helps visualize this feeling of flying high up in the skies, perhaps even heaven, or the rooftop of a luxury hotel on a tropical island. Violinist Joseph Joachim even described it as perfectly singing this idea of being lost to the world, like when one passes away into the afterlife. It could also be like when someone takes a vacation and gets away from their daily life for even a moment. Multiple pools, a bar, a beautiful blocky babe, 2 phones. What more could a guy ask for in heaven? Alright, I'm gonna stop trying to grasp the meaning of this song now. This feeling isn't quite as strong in Takata's version, which sounds rather bombastic. Request 3, from the New World Symphony No. 9 in E minor, Opus 95. Sumio wakes up. He's contemplating these dreams during his morning coffee. As he makes his way down the hall, wouldn't you know it, the stairs are blocked. This time by a masked man getting some tight squats in. It looks like Ito can't even get through. He tells us this guy goes by the name Crasher, and that he came to this island right after losing a big pro wrestling match back in Japan. Just like before, game logic tells us we can't squeeze through that spot that Crasher definitely isn't occupying. I also love how quickly Sumio gives up on an immediate solution here. Ito suggests going to the room to see if the guest he's staying with can help. In room 304, we see a densely pixelated match playing on their TV and a magazine featuring Crasher. That's all there is to see here. Back on the rooftop, Ito talks about Crasher's master that goes by El Soul Fight, who is currently using an alias known as Mr. Pirate. He's training Crasher incognito due to his notoriety. Sumio goes to room 302, where Mr. Pirate is staying, but it's locked. Sumio thinks he can get a hold of him by calling the room from Crasher's place. Sumio decides to use Catherine on a regular rotary phone for some reason. And if you really needed the guidebook, it explains that all you need to dial for the room is the room number itself. Wow, we are such geniuses. Mr. Pirate speaks in cartoonish pirate jargon, so you have no choice but to hear this music whenever discussing him for this analysis. Mr. Pirate tells Sumio to meet him at the roof. Sumio asks him why Crasher won't stop training. Okay, I'm trying to read this. Basically, Crasher won't stop training until he feels ready for his next challenge, and Mr. Pirate has no idea when that'll be, but respects Crasher enough not to stop him. Just like the fights, he suggests that we gotta ride this wave until a victor emerges. I think. This is all really hard to read through. Sumio won't accept this. Mr. Pirate tells him maybe Crasher just needs to be reminded of a certain history, something that'll make him reach that truth he's seeking. The ultimate motivator. Sumio talks to Ito, who hints that there is an interview for Mr. Pirate in the guidebook, which may have the answer he seeks. We jack into Crasher's thick fucking skull. In this interview, Mr. Pirate talks about Crasher and his fight of 210. Easy enough, the answer is 210. This solution awakens the fiery soul of Crasher, and in the midst of that, he lands a mean-ass dropkick right at Sumio's head. Sumio wakes up. He's greeted by Crasher, thanking him for restoring his fighting spirit. He starts sparring with Mr. Pirate, happy to see his apprentice shine once again. Crasher swears to become number one, and as Mr. Pirate dishes out his pose... This is where we really get a glimpse of this almost nauseating cycle. Sumio gets woken up by a call from Ito, does what he can to relieve situations that are blocking him from his destination, and while he may have helped an individual, his ultimate mission ends in failure. over and over again. Regarding the folks showcased here, it feels a bit like a pastiche on pro wrestlers and the dynamic stories they present for the characters they conjured up, and wrestlers changing their character throughout their career is also very common. Were you around before Stone Cold Steve Austin when he was stunning Steve Austin? Yeesh. According to Suda, the idea of these wrestlers getting away from the busy world and training in the midst of paradise came from a real training camp opened by famous Japanese pro wrestler Antonio Inoki. This camp was in Palau, a beautiful island in Oceania. It's interesting to think this wasn't just Suda or Uka throwing in pro wrestlers into this game for the sake of it, but rather this being a reference to something pro wrestlers did in real life. I'm willing to bet a lot of Mr. Pirate's monologues relate further to pro wrestlers and what they put themselves through to give their audience a show and build their story. Say what you want about how real or fake it is, the endurance they're putting their bodies through for the sake of their fight is commendable, and their stories make for some fun drama. Unless you're an aging idiot bozo like Shane McMahon. Yeah, nice grand return, asshole. And how does Sumio fit into this? I think this is a lesson of him learning to play along with others and try understanding their perspective. In other words, empathy. Certainly a good early lesson if you're going to start trying to help people with their problems. So the chapter was called From the New World Symphony No. 9 in E minor, Opus 95. Originally composed by Antonin Dvorak, it can be heard in Crasher's room. This song became popular in recent years. I recall it being used for an awesome boss fight in Ozur's Wrath, and the first Killer's Dead trailer even included a remix of this song. Of course, Takada's recomposition is much more relaxed, fitting the atmosphere of Lost Pass exquisitely. I can see why it was chosen to represent characters like El Soulfight and Crasher, being these pro wrestler showmen that do their best performing all-out fights against opponents for the sake of putting on a show. Request 4. Swonderful. Sumio wakes up. He goes on with his daily morning routine and also reflects on the two wrestlers from the last chapter, how the way they feed off their raw emotions meld perfectly with the overly dramatic world that is the professional wrestling scene. As we make our way to the lobby, a drunk stands in our way. Her name is Maria, and she demands Sumio find a weapon suitable to kill a vampire. With nowhere else to go, we head to the bar on the second floor. Here we see Stuart Rock from the introduction chapter, and Stefan Charbonny, the scoundrel from the phone calls. Stefan tells us to use a silver bullet. Talking to Stuart, we learn it's a mixed drink on the menu, but despite being dubbed the bartender, Stuart doesn't know how to mix drinks.
Yeah, unless the name of the drink includes the ingredients, I can't help you. Perhaps a gin and tonic that's made of gin and tonic.
He at least lets us know about the drink menu in the guide, so Sumio solves his problem the same way he does every problem, by jacking it in. Find the silver bullet's list of ingredients, input the millimeter amounts, and... Stuart is kind enough to deliver the drink himself. He comes back and says she didn't like it. Sumio goes up to Maria, and it seems like she swapped personalities and says she wants to experience August. Sumio goes back to the bar and talks to Stefan, who openly mocks game design.
The offside flag is truly magical, turning a game into a spectacle. Digital games require flags too. That is why I'm going to trigger a flag for you. You may dislike me, but also have the bravery to praise me as a man of accomplishment.
Game event flags are a common part of designing adventure games and the like. You know, talking to a certain person in order to trigger an event, that's a flag. Sumio talks to Stuart in order to make another cocktail. This one is slightly more tricky. August is part of summer, but there's no listed drink like that. Instead, the description for spring feeling describes a variation known as summer feeling, where it halves the lemon juice and adds 10 millimeters of watermelon juice. So the combo is... The impressed Stuart hurries the drink to our favorite lush. No good. Huh. That's weird.
Master, it's been a long time.
I'm not your master.
Talking to the lady again, she doesn't remember anything when she's drunk, but aware that Sumio's a professional searcher. She says she needs to find the password to a zip file in her computer to get rid of what she calls an earthquake virus. Sumio talks to Stefan again, and this flag tells him that her room is 407. Entering, we see a laptop on the coffee table. As you begin the jacking process,
Oh, chill out.
he comes in and hypes us up with a new catchphrase. What's really funny is Sumio replaces his old speech with this, sound effect and all, for the rest of the game. Once again, the drink menu shows our solution. Earthquake is a cocktail, and the solution is only 2 digits. So yes, Sumio, it is indeed that simple. Oh, fuck. Thank you for calling in the Geek Squad, ma'am. Maria doesn't seem too mad about her computer frying. She already messed it up before he even got there. Maria says she's sick of this paradise. She was trying to get away from her regular life, her responsibilities. Maria's overburdened at her job. The only reason this computer was given to her was so she can work from home. And her line of business? Fallen angel. Sounds like their work ethic isn't too great. Maybe that's why she mentions the devil.
It's just becoming too much damn work. Like, I've got 100 emails piling up on my Gmail account. There's a bunch of, bullshit paperwork I've got to do, which I've been putting off. I don't get paid until the end of my job, which is eternity. It's forever. So I just don't even care anymore. I just don't care anymore.
Maria says it's about time she enjoyed herself as she flies out of the room and crashes directly into the plane. So, as you're coming to see, Sumio's helping a lot of people move on with their lives. They're struggling with these burdens and just need someone to give them the right push in order to keep going. Break through the stagnation. Maria, however, is the first person that was being so upfront with what was burdening her, at least by the end. We never see her again, so perhaps she found an end to this hell she's been dwelling in. The idea that a place like Los Paz can attract something as mythical as a fallen angel, perhaps demon if we aren't too charitable, is intriguing, and this occurrence could link to what Sister Phantom was trying to tell Sumio. I also found Stefan's rambles about game design and flags to be really endearing. These days, those kinds of meta jokes are more typical, but I find it unique how much this game was making fun of the medium all the way back in 2001.
Adventure games are set up in a process of trial and error. A higher point to aim for is trial and signal. What I mean is that everything has value in the story. You aren't adding failures onto the lives of the characters within the story, but in that time, at that moment, digging out the meaning, so to speak, for characters in other games. When they do an action without meaning or an incorrect action, judging those actions by just a 0 or a 1, a stupid, meaningless, happy or bad feeling, the player has long already figured out the workings of the game.
Let me try to explain a bit what he's talking about here. In this quote, he's essentially criticizing adventure games that try to provide a morality system that determines a good or bad ending. This has been implemented in games since the mid-80s and is still pretty common these days. Different from games where you uncover secrets or earn a better conclusion depending on your skill. Rather, he's talking about moral decisions in which the game may or may not inform you which way you're leaning. I'm not entirely sure why Suda takes issue with this. I can only guess he doesn't like how it influences players' decisions when they're simply being told something they did is considered good or evil.
For that reason, I don't really like these fake Boolean value or flag decisions. If you make it like that, no matter what option you pick, the result is the same. You get a half-assed story with the characters you can decide the fate of.
I guess with Stefan's rambles about flags and game design, he's mocking the idea of Sumio and the player trying to find the right thing they're supposed to do in order to progress the story. I thank Akis for not only helping me with translating that quote, along with others, but also helping me understand a little better what Suda is talking about here. Suda doesn't strike me as a writer that wants his stories influenced by what he or anyone considers good or evil actions, and then split the narrative into such a binary presentation. He's even mocked the very idea of influenced endings like that in future games such as Killer 7 and the 25th Ward. The title for this chapter is Swonderful. Originally composed by George Gershwin, Takada's version sounds a lot more loopy and easygoing. I can almost see a drunkard stumbling down the sidewalk to this little tune, which I feel was the intent, especially with it being the song featured in the bar area. It was also famously used for a scene in 1951's An American in Paris, which doesn't really have much relevance here, but it's literally the name of the last chapter in this game. I don't know. Request 5, The Entertainer. Sumio wakes up. He notices how strange the passage of time has been. Every day feels the same, but he's not sure if every day literally is the same or not. Things seem to be fine and dandy until we reach the main entrance. Ito not only spoils Sumio's mood about having to get to the airport by foot, but there's also a situation regarding the two gentlemen sitting in the main lobby. According to this one rude prick, they're the Balboa brothers, Sonny and Tabs Balboa, everyone's favorite famous comedy duo. They're having an issue with checking in, as their agency booked the rooms under their stage names. Ito explains that the two need to prove they are indeed the Balboa brothers in a convincing manner, not one that plays into bias where he is personally a fan of their work. But that's a little weird. I don't think there's an unbiased way to prove it like that, but whatever, this is a video game. We're going with the video game rules. We're told Yayoi is a film buff. She says Sonny is a musclehead and Tabs is a fast talker. Sumio thinks Tabs can be the key to their identity with an unmistakable performance. Sonny agrees, but says Tabs won't get those lips flapping without his signature afro. He explains to Sumio why that's the case, but not us. They traveled light, so Tabs ain't got his afro. They came on a pedal boat that transforms into high-end speakers? And those speakers are on the other side of the lobby. What's poor little Sumio to do? Desperate, he asks Ito if they have a wig on hand. He suggests Sue's mop as a substitute. Mondo goes to her and Maddie to learn about the mop, which has a step counter attached to it. This makes it easy to keep track of when the mop needs to be replaced. Right now, the counter shows 0221. Looking through the guide, there's an ad for a step counter, stating that it doesn't detach from you until you've made 10,000 steps. I'm not sure if this sort of wearable technology existed back then, but I had a Fitbit when I was younger, and it actually was a decent bit of motivation. It must have been something with the counter itself, slightly gamifying the idea of exercise a bit more for me. I should probably get one of those again. Anyway, the key here is the device detaches at 10,000 steps, so with Catherine, you hack the counter and add the difference. Sumio brings the wig to them, but Tabs doesn't seem too active, wearing a dirty mop on his head. Sonny swears that if you fix the speakers, I guess they're broken, it'll get Tabs going. Sumio's stubbornness knows no bounds, but I like what Sonny says here, that in show business, you can't hang on to your ego if you want to go far. Your ego and pride will only hold you back and suffocate the potential you have as an actor, as a comedian, as a performer. Sonny's losing faith in Sumio, comparing him to Stefan. He doesn't like that very much and starts contemplating how he's been approaching these situations. So let's do them a solid and fix this bad boy. The guide shows an ad for these speakers, which can apparently transform into other things, like a bed or a cannon? But the normal speaker shape is listed as 5, and we want them shrunk down to its smaller size, which starts as 1. So the answer is, of course, Sumio thanks Sunny for waking him up a bit, and it isn't long until Tabs gets going.
Hey, bro, what's up with the long face? You can't do that. You can't get sad or down or nothing. Won't solve anything. So we messed up on the croak. Hell, we almost croaked such a small wave, though. Small wave. Still, we're not so unlucky. Not unlucky at all, I'd say. Lucky, in fact, lucky is what we are. The name of our luck, Mr. Mondo. Being here was the best piece of luck. How can we thank you? What can we say? I can say a lot, but what's that piece that you have got there anyway? I'm so into gadgets. I got a new little gadget the other day, I gotta tell you, you know?
How's that, Ito?
Amazing! The one and only Tabs Balboa.
Ito is absolutely delighted by Tabs' lip work and accepts this as absolute evidence of their identity. Of course, once this is settled... So, this chapter was centered around the Balboa brothers, a regular comedy duo. You know, like Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, Tim and Eric, Smosh. The chapter talks not just about what it takes to be a successful performer, but I think it might have some slightly underhanded commentary on the dynamic of a double-act duo. I guess I can't say Sunny did nothing to help the situation, but Tabs and his own act solved the problem. Are the efforts of fame really split down the middle? Does one end up doing more work than the other? Does one end up being the real driving force, whereas the other is completely dependent on their partner with the actual talent? Sunny was quickly accepting that it was all on Tabs to reveal their identity. In other words, their notoriety, their self-assigned purpose in show business. The song of the day is The Entertainer, originally composed by ragtime artist Scott Joplin. Such a joyous and fun song, huh? A very famous song too. I'm sure people recognize it without even knowing the title. It's typically used to attract audiences and, of course, entertain. A perfect classical to match the Balboa brothers over here, who are dedicated to nothing if not entertaining their adoring fans. Request 6, Aaron G. Again. Sumio wakes up. During his coffee, he's contemplating what Sunny said to him and considers he might be too nice, being unable to say no to people. Makes sense, it's not like we've seen him force his way through any of these situations or just give up. Instead, he does his best to help individuals he barely knows. He just complains a lot. But now it's time to head off. You finally get to leave the hotel building itself. Fresh air! But almost immediately, Stefan Charbonny stands in your way. Sumio has had it up to here with Stefan, but he manages to keep his attention by dangling a Yayoi in peril right in front of him. He explains to Sumio as we are given the visual of Yayoi taking a drink of poison. I know this is supposed to be a serious moment, but her blocky ass feet are killing me. Of course, it didn't look much better on the PS2. According to Stefan, she chose poorly and is now slowly dying. Shut the fuck up about soccer, you cheese-eating shit! Stefan says she only has 2 hours, but there's an antidote in room 404, Stefan's room. Yeah, get his ass, Sumio! Oh, but Stefan reassures this won't help Yayoi. He gives him a little trail to the antidote, and Sumio runs around in a panic. He finds Yayoi on the roof. Then inside room 404 shortly after. Stefan calls, mocking the flag triggers once again, while stating his computer will lead to the antidote. But not without warning Sumio about Ito, that he's the one pulling all the strings here. Ominous. Sumio can't think about that. All he cares about right now is saving Yayoi. This puzzle is easy so long as you understand its instructions. You have to refer to this image as well as the coinciding text. You just follow the steps and hit the numbers as you land on them. The mix-up would be restart from square one and head northeast, which some might think it means figuratively, as in 7 again, but they mean literally square one. Kinda reminds me of a couple puzzles in the original Silent Hill games. Anyway. We solved the puzzle, but uh-oh, Sumio is too late! Hey wait, she isn't dying, she's just asleep. Back at the computer, Stefan explains he never poisoned Yayoi, but that Sumio shouldn't be so easy in putting his trust in people and what they say, noting Ito never came to help him nor Yayoi. And with that, computer terrorism. This chapter is where the intrigue really gets turned up. Like I said, Stefan is the closest thing you can call an antagonist so far in the story, but one can't deny that he might be trying to help Sumio with some supposed truth bombs. What is Ito's deal? Why did he never arrive? Where did he go? While the previous chapters felt considerably lighthearted and perhaps even wholesome, this is the first one that I think is supposed to make us feel uneasy, like this paradise might be some sort of facade. Oh, the song was Aaron G, again. I guess there's technically no new royalty-free song for this chapter, although just like the first Aaron G, this one revolved around Stefan and Yayoi once again. Yeah, that's all I got. Request 7, Children's Corner. Sumio wakes up. During his coffee, the thought of Stefan won't leave his mind. Everything looks clear until... right in the fucking nuts. Why don't we just ignore that and keep going?
Hans Moleman Productions presents Man Getting Hit by Football.
How the hell? Well, no way lightning strikes 3 times, right?
Hi, I'm Johnny Knoxville, and this is the Cub Test.
Let's stop torturing Sumio and see who's landing these amazing bank shots to his jewels. It's some snot-nosed kid. He immediately mocks both Sumio and the game's visual output.
Our polygon faces look totally different from our 2D art.
You can't say that!
Oh, I got more. A terrace? And this island? Like, people are going to believe that.
Kind of odd how many folks in the hotel have this level of self-awareness. And he's not just stopping at the visuals, he's mocking the plot, the sequences, and even the logic of Catherine. As the kid runs off, Sumio tries to give chase and warns of the ramifications if this kid unravels the game's logic and appeal, sounding like stuffy reviewers by the minute. He runs rampant trying to find the cretin, learning his name is Shotaro Kai. As Sumio comes to, Crasher immediately gets on the victim blame train. Apparently the kid wanted to meet Mr. Pirate, and what a coincidence, here he is too. After a bunch of back and forth stacked with pirate jargon, he says the kid went to see Yayoi, who's staying in room 204. She messes with Sumio a bit as he's doing a bad job as a searcher. Can't find a whole ass child? Pathetic. Yayoi implies that he might be in Sumio's own room. Making us run all over the hotel, this chapter also ends with someone telling him that he's too quick to trust people as he continues messing with him. In such an adult-oriented resort area, a kid as young as him has no choice but to make his own fun, I guess. This is probably the goofiest and most lighthearted chapter in the entire game. We're also getting a real look at how easily manipulated Sumio can be as a character. I guess Stefan's words were ringing in his head, but not as bad as that ball rung his fucking nuts. There's not too much to observe here, except how rebellious Shotaro is as an individual. Where the likes of Sumio and others will briefly wink at the player, Shotaro won't stop mocking the whole design of the game, killing immersion with playful glee. This is also the only chapter in the game without any sort of puzzles, emphasizing how there's no room for brain work here, as this is playtime with little Shotaro. This chapter also serves as an extension to this analog of mocking adventure game design. People like to pin Suda as someone that makes bad games on purpose, but I don't think that's what he's doing. It's more that he wants to include this sense of irony with the games he directs. The Silver Case had some of that going on with its troves of expository world building and sense of railroadedness that was even odd for a visual novel type game at the time. So Flower, Sun, and Rain having this ironic sense of adventure games with its design, and now some of its characters, is a lot of fun. The song for this chapter is Children's Corner, composed by Claude Debussy. A fluttery, lighthearted song that was dedicated to the composer's 3-year-old daughter. Takada makes it sound even more childlike and wondrous with his spin on the composition, to the point where I'd even say it's unrecognizable, but I probably just don't have the ear for noticing the similarities. Either way, it suits Shotaro's rambunctiousness very well. Request 8, Ave Maria. Sumio wakes up. He is still stewing about Shotaro and his trickery. We get pretty far, leaving the hotel, running down the path for a good bit until we reach the main gate, which is closed. Sumio sees another path that leads to a lovely church. We find a girl sitting alone nearby. Her name is Yuri, and she says she's about to get hitched, but is severely depressed at the moment. She catches up Sumio on her woes. Her fiancé, Seiji, became distant shortly after they got to Los Paz. Hearing the organ play Ave Maria, Sumio heads inside the church to see Seiji, also alone. Sumio gets him to open up about the situation. He's scared of committing to Yuri. He sees marriage as this big step, which, I mean, it is. I get it. I'm on my way there. Seiji is realizing how much Yuri is influencing his life, his aspects, etc. Now that he's so far into this relationship, literally the day before they're supposed to get married, he's not sure if this is what he wants to commit to. It's something I've seen depicted in various shows and film, but it happens a lot in real life too. Legit, I had a friend who dropped out of his own wedding like a month before it was supposed to happen. Seiji says that this sudden loss of confidence came from being unable to properly play the song now, stating it's out of tune. He doesn't have the form to properly retune it, so Sumio grabs this responsibility by the organs and gets Catherine out to start solving. As usual, the guidebook has the answers. Once you find the page describing a bit of history on the instrument, it spells out the setting needed for the wedding ceremony. Easy as? As soon as you're done, Seiji is back on his groove, wailing on those keys. He's so happy, he even invites Sumio to the wedding, which Yuri quickly revokes afterward. But she seems really happy that things are back on. Yuri tells Sumio that the two have known each other since they were children, that they both grew up in the shelter. And with that... This is another chapter where not too much happens, but it has some of my favorite interactions between Sumio and others. I love how he talks to these two, especially Yuri. I think Seiji's lack of confidence throughout was very human behavior as well. If that one thing just isn't right in such pivotal moments of your life, it could make everything feel wrong. And on the topic of love and marriage, I like to think he was having a hard time understanding what that sense of commitment means for an individual. Paraphrasing a lyric famously sung by David Bowie, love dares you to change the way you care about yourself. In other words, it's a challenge one has to face where the world doesn't revolve around you anymore. You're sharing this world with someone else, someone you love more than life itself. You need to be able to face and conquer that challenge in a sense that makes both of you happy. Sumio helped Seiji finish that challenge and find confidence that he can make Yuri happy for the rest of their shared lives. Speaking a bit more on the couple, I can't help but notice Yuri stating that she and Seiji were both from the shelter, with a capital S. This is our first clear-cut piece of evidence that the island of Lost Pass is part of the same world as the Silver Case. Besides that, as stated in the original game, the shelter program was this project concocted by government bodies and high elites with the intended goal to create a perfect society of obedient citizens. It involved the trafficking of thousands of children, attempting to brainwash and study their behaviors inside a giant underground bunker. Long story short, this project was more or less abandoned, and most children were simply let out onto Japan, and we as an audience barely know what happened to most of them. As characters have theorized, most of them likely went on to live normal lives. And from what we're told, this newlywed couple are two of such examples. I like to think having two shelter kids remain close and find love within each other is a great example of how different this game is from the Silver Case. Even children from such dark, messed up origins can find their happy ending. The song for the day is Ave Maria, originally composed by Ellen Jesang III for a poem known as The Lady of the Lake. The religious connotations are clear, as Ave Maria is a prayer to the Virgin Mary, a perfect song for this couple performing what appears to be the act of a traditional marriage within this church, which aligns with Christianity and Catholicism. But of course, Ave Maria has been used in both tragic and joyous connotations, as the song can really accentuate both a miracle and a misfortune. So I like the idea that what was happening between Seiji and Yuri was coming close to a tragedy, but it took Sumio's attitude to help them reach what will become a loving miracle for them as a happy couple. Request 9, Rhapsody in Blue. Sumio wakes up. During his coffee, he ponders over the couple and how they were able to find light within each other while buried in so much darkness. Ito is losing patience, so we hoof it. But wouldn't you know it, a car crash right in front of us. We go down to the open road to try finding someone that can help, and run into a bicycler. The bicycler's bicycle is busted. The bicycler also doesn't like Sumio calling his bicycle a bicycle. Yeah, it's a bike. Shut up, you stupid bicycler. He probably tries to call himself a cyclist too, because that doesn't sound as lame. You're not a cyclist, you're a bicycler. Just like how Sumio isn't a handyman, but a searcher. Ken's the bicycle messenger, and he needs our help to fix his ride.
Everywhere I go, I see his face.
This is an article written by Stefan Charbonny. He's going on and on about this bicycle race and the logic of their gears. You need to pay attention to what he says determines the gear ratio, which is the amount of teeth on the front gear by the amount of the back gear. And what do you know, we got 2 gears right here. Division makes it 3.2. Therefore, Ken's relieved about his bicycle being ship-shape once again, talking about how he and Maddie work at the diner nearby. He says he aspires to be a messenger for a big city because he feels like being a messenger for such a small island isn't rewarding enough. But Sumio tells him he should have confidence in his job, that it's just as important here as it is anywhere else, that the folks of Los Pas depend on him. What's next, Sumio? These people are his family? Ken is motivated again. Says he'll treat Sumio to a meal at the diner, and that he'll meet him there. Reaching the diner, Ken is worried as Maddie hasn't actually arrived yet, and Sumio has no choice but to jog all the way back to the hotel. Oh, let's go on fast.
What? No! Oh my god!
Final destination level.
You're not hurt?
No, I'm still in one piece. Sorry to have worried you. But there's no way to pass the sign now.
Maddie says the building's been having electrical problems and thinks something is wrong with their power supplies located at Eliki Island. So, we gotta walk all the way back. We take this itty-bitty baby boat to said island and find these gigantic power supplies going haywire. There are 6 of these supplies with their respective numbers shown. In the guide, you'll find all 6 here paired with cute problems relating to people residing at Los Pas. We won't really go over all 6 of these, but they're pretty easy to solve. Sumio the electrician has fixed their Eliki Island problem. He takes in the charm of this island, and with that, this chapter was a good example of Sumio not just solving people's problems with his fix-all case, but with his words too. Ken was feeling unmotivated with his place in life, but Sumio was able to remind him the importance of his duty and that he needs to find that confidence to do his job with pride. While definitely not the best advice for everyone feeling reluctant about their job or place in life, I think Ken just needed a refresher of how much he's depended upon by the people he loves and cares for, like Maddie. I don't think there's a problem yearning for the bigger stages, bigger opportunities, but sometimes you gotta keep your feet on the ground and remember those around you that depend on you and, just as importantly, care about you as well. The song of the chapter is Rhapsody in Blue, originally composed by George Gershwin, a jazzy little tune, mutated into this explosive rockin' piece. From what I've read on Gershwin and how he composed it in a haste, it makes me think of Ken and his field of work, rushing and moving as a loyal messenger for the people of Los Pas. Request 10. I love you, Porgy. Sumio wakes up. During his coffee, he ponders about this deep discomfort he felt while in Eliki Island. Perhaps a premonition? Sumio heads down to the same path as yesterday, and just like yesterday, the exact same car accident. This time, Maddie saw it too. Instead of either calling for help, Maddie just offers Sumio a free meal. Unfortunately, by the time we get in the diner, Maddie pleads with you to help out a man who may have caused the accident they saw. Sumio tries to fight back, but it's no use. He can't deviate from what the game demands. It's not said anywhere in the story itself, but the man at the table is Daizaburo Kai. Some might recognize the name from the official Silver Case character guide. While not appearing in the Silver Case, he is identified as the chairman of the TRO/CCO Alliance, a private organization that specializes in technological advancements, using its influence to control government figures in the 24 wards, although later discovered to be a sham of an organization that's actually under the hand of a group even more secret, even more powerful and elite than them. And how does all this relate to the chapter of the game? It doesn't. Like, at all. He's just a sad man on vacation. Not just for causing a car accident, but also for losing something important to him. A gift from father to son. And he says his son is Shotaro. And when Sumio hears that, he is shocked. Can't you see how shocked he is? He immediately antagonizes the sad dad, but sad dad is not sad anymore. Now sad dad is mad dad. He starts telling off Sumio, mocking him for his equipment, his clothes, and even the game's logic. That bad apple did not fall far from the tree. Sumio apprehensively decides to start looking for Daisaburo's present. Back outside, Ken notes seeing Step, a dude that's quick on his feet and has a knack for thievery. Sumio approaches Step, who tells him he's the one that stole the gift and left it at the scene of the accident, while challenging him to go find it. Turns out Shotaro is at the scene already. Suitface. What a perfect childish insult. He tells Suitface that he saw what his dad lost, but won't help Suitface until he finds the soccer ball he lost. As far as I can tell, there's no real clue as to where it might be. You just have to suppose that it's in the one place you haven't been to yet. The dumpsters near the hotel. Once Sumio finds it, Shotaro is here to push our buttons some more. He's even mocking people that are playing this game right now. Sumio threatens violence, which just gets Shotaro to keep going with this wall-breaking nonsense. Old Suitface has decided that enough is enough. Yeah, everyone likes seeing a child get hurt, right? I still remember the whiplash seeing this game fully commit to the bit, even for one as goofy as this.
Shut it.
Oh!
He actually did it.
He hit him right in the head.
I did like 3 different angles.
Guys, I'm getting my Twitch banned.
Hey, remember how that stupid Roiland game tried to pull the same joke, only way more obnoxiously?
Shoot me! See what happens! Oh, don't I look so shootable? Look at me! Ah, you shot me, I'm dead!
All right there, are you happy now? Well, I didn't think we'd be allowed to kill him. Normally, killing children in games isn't allowed, but he's dead. We killed this kid. Are you happy now? We killed a kid! A kid is dead now! There goes our E for everybody rating!
But they couldn't even fully commit to the bit because they're cowards?
No, it's fine. He was 30 years old, so don't feel too bad.
Yeah, fuck you, Squanch Games. Nah, but it's all good. Shotaro just laughs it off. Like everything else Suitface tries to throw at him. But for being such a good sport, he tells Suitface he tossed the gift in one of those dumpsters nearby. Once you get there, you need to find the trash collection page on the guide and input the actual day they collect the trash and take it out, which it states is the morning after you are ordered to bring them to these dumpsters. Therefore, the answer is the day after those listed for non-flammable trash. Sumio finds a lighter and deduces that Daizaburo must have dropped it while driving and caused an accident the moment he found it. Step saw something shiny on his person and decided to snatch it, but they threw it away when he realized it was just a lighter. Daizaburo then sent his son to find it, but threw it away for some reason? I'm not sure, but hey, here's Big Papa now. Shotaro takes credit for finding it this time, to Sumio's dismay. Yeah, no kidding. But that's the whole joke. This wasn't a gift for Shotaro like Sumio thought. He meant it was a gift from his own dad. Ridiculous. In the end, Shotaro's present was another day hanging out with old Soupface here and playing tricks on him. What a good gift. The father and son have a wonderful little bonding moment and... Hey, wanna see a magic trick? So, what was this story focused on? Most prominently, the connection between a father and son, the importance of connection between generations. Not only did Daizaburo cherish this lighter he got from his own father, but we witnessed how much his son, Shotaro, was just like him. When it comes to the game Suda directs, fatherhood is something that seems to be a passing focus, but never the main aspect. It's hard to think what Suda is trying to say with his interest in fatherhood or fathers in general, especially considering he grew up without one. Maybe that's what it is. His dad literally left his family when he was just 7, leaving behind financial debt his mother had to deal with and a last name for his son that she would rightfully reject, as we covered in my analysis on the Silver Case. I'm having trouble really grasping what they're getting at here. Assuming Suda wrote this chapter, perhaps he's grasping at memories that he had of his father and almost fantasizing what that relationship would have blossomed into if his father stuck around to care for him, to love him, to provide. It's kind of hard to say, to be honest. The song for this chapter is I Love You Porgy by George and Ira Gershwin, and people most likely know the song from Nina Simone's performance with its lyrics. From what I understand, it's about someone yearning for the protection of someone they love to get them out of this cycle of abuse. That makes sense. Old Soupface here clocking at kids' heads. He's a menace. Chapter 11, Claire de Lune. Sumio wakes up. This time, it's already evening. No coffee for him today, instead having a long dialogue with Sue. She says she likes hiding under Sumio's bed, that it brings her comfort. Why she likes tripping him, I don't know, probably because it's funny. Sumio gets the notion that she needs his help, but Sue confides in him that his attitude has made it really hard to ask. Sumio's taken aback by this, but understands where she's coming from. I kinda like this, because Sumio has been a pretty clear-cut example of an unlikable protagonist thus far, similar to many characters of the Grasshopper Library, and I like that Sue gets to straight up tell him how they feel interacting with him, stating how off-putting he tends to be. Sue claims that she has lived in Los Pas for as long as she can remember, and emphasizes how convenient it is that everything Sumio needs to solve everyone's problems is in the guidebook he received at the beginning of this adventure. She then invites him to check out page 16 and says it's about Miss Vian, which is actually a small translation flub, from what I understand at least. She's referring to Sayaka Bayan, who we learned about back in the Silver Case, specifically the Kamui Drome chapter, a pop sensation that committed suicide after discovering overzealous fans were spying on her and live streaming inside her own apartment. Sue says that she was a big fan of Sayaka Bayan and that the moon on page 16 reminds her of the pop star. more than the actual photo of her on page 33, which Sumio noted. As she says, the glittering, sad light of the moon spreading across the world encapsulates her perfectly. Perhaps she's referring to the tragedy of her suicide being something felt across Japan, maybe even the world, and how her legacy adds to the tragedy that made so many people feel her pain and even motivate them to influence the world to their best ability, as we saw in the silver case. Anyway, she gives Sumio, it's hard to tell, but it's supposed to be a pocket watch, and asks him to help her search for a secret so hidden she does not know what it is. Su makes her leave, and Sumio goes down to ask Ito about the moon, but he's being surprisingly rude to him. I almost feel. Look at it.
I see it.
Ringing.
I love it. It's so good.
I'm scared of Ito.
Shut up.
Oh my god.
No,
I love Ito.
Let's keep bothering. 3 times. 3 times.
Oh, I'm so scared.
Shut up. That's probably how he sounds.
Crawl off and die.
Why?
Okay, that's enough bothering you. Heading out, we finally get to see Lost Pass shrouded in the darkness of the night sky. The typical background music is gone too, emphasizing how isolated and almost threatening the dead of night feels in this tropical island. Walking down these paths, one can't help but feel like they could get jumped right around the corner. Oh, thank goodness, it's just a giant purple alligator. What? As we reach the lighthouse, Su beat us to it. Jeez, she's being mean too. Why is everyone suddenly being so nasty to poor old Sumio? Anyway, running up the stairs is a real fight with the camera, but as we get to the top, all Sumio does is admire it for a bit. And then we gotta jog back to the hotel. Back in our room, Su tells him to relax for something important, so Sumio gets on the bed while she crawls under it. She compares fate itself to the far side of the moon. Nobody can see it, but it certainly exists. Su says she has no memories of her childhood, and the dread of that has been swelling up inside her recently. Although she says she remembers the moment she was born, she saw the crescent moon up in the night sky. She was covered in blood and completely alone. Sounds like her birth was anything but natural. Herein lies the secret she is not aware of, asking you to search for it, but says that finding out this secret of her birth will reveal the secret of Lost Pass. She says Sumio needs to save this island, but he replies that his only intent is to finish what Ito requested, then leave. However, Su drops her own bomb on him, stating not a single day has passed since his arrival. That Sumio is stuck reliving the same day over and over, with the same explosion happening over and over. I guess everyone else has been too. Up until now, Sumio has had trouble understanding what is real and what is only a dream. Su tells him that if he manages to stop the explosion and uncover the terrorists behind all this, he'll be able to escape this time loop. And the secret starts with the pocket watch. Anyway, Su emphasized page 16 and its crescent moon. The guide says it's a 4.3 lunar position. Therefore, Su calls as soon as we solve it, telling Sumio to head to the roof and all shall be explained. When we get there, she does not explain shit, instead saying it's best to leave these mysteries as is, belittling Sumio for thinking he can solve things so easily. Before Sumio knows it, a man with a gun is right next to him, takes aim, and shoots him down right as the plane flies by. Finally ending this night. Dude, fuck you! This is the only chapter that takes place at night, and it's fitting, considering this was about the passage of time, what with Sue telling us about the warped sense of time the island is trapped in, the pocket watch, and emphasis on the crescent moon. Every single day before this has had a strong sense of repetition, where the environment has remained exactly the same in every single chapter. This is the only chapter where it felt like actual time had passed during our stay, taking place in the dead of night. There's also something unnerving about the environment now. Los Pas Island has this beautiful serenity to it that really exudes this feeling of paradise during the daytime. At night, it's unsettling, almost threatening. To be frank, the dark areas looked a little more atmospheric on PS2, bearing more shaders and such. Reminds me of visiting parts of my home country, Colombia, as a kid, and being enamored by the beautiful views of the mountains on these windy roads. But we'd be driving down the same roads at night, and it really doesn't have that same feeling. All of its beauty enveloped in darkness. A simple change in time can make a charming, serene-looking place suddenly appear so dangerous, so sinister. I also like how Sue described her memories, being completely alone at what she remembers of her own birth, and being covered in blood. When asked about this scene, Suda gave a little more insight on what Sue was getting at.
Blood. The island's memory. A fragment of history of the time before Mondo arrived. Well, I'll just say, there was a massacre that erased the victims from history. That genocide took place under the guise of a mass production that was going on. Sue's memories manifest themselves as an unfading consciousness in after-images, an image of blood.
So, some of this game's story seems to be inspired by mass killings of indigenous people by those with intent to grow and capitalize from what those committing said atrocities would call free land, something that's happened far too many times in the real world. Besides that, the man with the gun at the end of the chapter looked to be the same person that we saw in the beginning of the game, although we still don't know who he is or what his motivation could be. Oh hell yeah, a certified hood classic for this chapter. Claire de Lune by Claude Debussy. Probably not saying that right. Such a beautiful piece that encapsulates the world drowned in darkness, leaving only the moonlight in the sky to keep you company. A peaceful sense of darkness. God, you'll love to hear it. Unsurprisingly, Takata's composition is fantastic, inserting this sense of twinkling twilight to the song. It really adds to the wondrous nature of this chapter, including how Sue described the soul of Sayaka Bayan. Request 12. I Got Rhythm. Sumio doesn't wake up. He's dead. So, now we turn to two suits that have rolled into town. Island. This is Remy Fawzil and Yoshimitsu Koshimizu, two federal agents called in for the murder of one Sumio Mondo. Remy is already sensing something is wrong with this island. Yoshimitsu notices a step running down the bridge, holding what looks like Catherine. They pay no mind though. Remy's senses are going off the rails apparently. These two are preparing for what could be the culmination of their careers. They arrive to the front of the hotel, checking out the scene where Sumio's body landed, amazingly still intact. Ito explains to them what happened and how nobody even heard the gunshot, despite it definitely occurring from our perspective. Ito tells Yoshimitsu a bit more about Sumio, how he always carried around a silver case with him, which reminds him that he saw Step running around with one. On a hunch, he tells Remy that he's heading to the shopping center to try catching Step.
Koshi, I'm thirsty.
What?
I'm thirsty. Get me something to drink, would you?
What am I, your errand boy?
You're going to shopping center, right? I don't think a drink is asking too much.
What do you want?
I'll leave that up to you.
And I'll randomly pick one.
Low calorie, please.
So you're not leaving it up to me. You've got a preference.
I don't like carbonated drinks either.
I know that much.
No caffeine either.
So what do you just want?
Darjeeling, no sugar.
There you go. I'll never stop saying it. I love this dialogue. Not just because it's funny, but it actually feels pretty human too. Reminds me of old Kevin Smith movies and how a lot of the humor in those films came from the natural sounding banter between characters as well as their line deliveries as actors.
She cheated on you how many times?
8.5.
8.5?
Party at John K's senior year. I get blitzed, pass out in his bedroom. Caitlin comes in, jumps all over me.
That's cheating.
No, in the middle of it, she called me Brad.
She called you Brad?
Called me Brad.
That's not cheating. People say crazy shit during sex. One time I called this girl Mom.
Now we're hoofing it to the shopping center to find Step. Speaking of steps, I like how the DS's step counter is completely still since we're not playing as Sumio anymore. A nice little detail. Once we reach the center, Remy gives us the intel on Step that he just recently got back from his stay in France. They aren't told why he was there in the first place, but I'll get back to that in a bit. Yoshimitsu corners Step inside the building. He psychs himself up before approaching Step, even mentioning Nakatagawa, a member of Central that worked with the Heinous Crimes unit back in the Silver Case. Makes me think where the likes of Yoshimitsu and Remy came from, possibly also being members of Central, but no need to get into that right now. We can only find Step if we walk slowly. Once we do, Yoshimitsu points his gun towards him. However, Remy calls in, pleading him to get out of there, saying this isn't Step, but a clone of him, designed to be a secret weapon, a human bomb. This clone says he grew tired of the repetition of this island. Step gives his regards and commences self-destruction as his left eye glows a bright light. Hey, we can finally talk about Toriko. Don't worry guys, I didn't forget her. I decided to save her introduction in the video for this chapter because this is the first time she's directly interacting with Sumio's story, as you'll see in a bit. Her name is Toriko Kusabi, and she appears at the end of each chapter, crossing paths with individuals dwelling about the hotel. Typically one that Sumio was helping. Regarding the flow of the game, she serves as this soft landing of sorts, as her playful nature of chasing Chris around is shown after every plane explosion thus far. Suda said this was a way to ease the player's mood back after dealing with the heavier nature of Sumio's escapades.
A realistic contemporary Toriko wouldn't have been as charming, so she became a strange girl floating in a fantastic time, symbolizing the peculiarity of the game. Nevertheless, she has another role. Mondo is directly involved in the incident and the curtain falls after the plane explodes. You can call it cleaning up after the mess.
I can also appreciate how this game, like the Silver Case, involves the perspective of a bystander with their own adventure as the story continues. Of course, Toriko's segments are much shorter than Tokyo's. Even their names are similar. The end of this chapter is when we finally see her catch up to Chris, and the two immediately start bickering about why he's named Christina, even though he's a boy. Oh yeah, Chris can talk. He tells Toriko he's been running off because he was tailing someone the whole time. Must be important. Toriko goes up to face the mysterious individual. It's the guy from the rooftop, the one that shot Sumio. This is Sundan's shot. Toriko believes him to be a real threat, intending to end him right here and now. She accuses him of killing their savior, Sumio. However, he doesn't see Sumio in such a light. He offers a compromise of resetting, which I believe means that he controls time to an extent. Perhaps he's the source of the island's warped cycle? Toriko still refuses to cooperate and accuses him of being Kamui Uehara. This bewilders him, and English players for a solid 8 years, probably. To be continued. Oh, you're nice again, Ito. Fat lot of good that does Sumio. He's fucking dead. A lot going on in this chapter, most significantly an intermission of Sumio's life as we play as a different character. That sounds familiar. And Sundan's shot bears a strong resemblance to someone from the Silver Case character guide, who only went by Sundance. Like Daizaburo Kai, he does not appear in the actual game. He's listed as the FSO party leader. The FSO was an organization that functioned as a non-profit that focused on environmental preservation. I'll talk about Toriko more at the end of the next chapter, as it's the last time the game focuses on her. The song for this chapter is called I Got Rhythm, which was credited to Ira and George Gershwin, but apparently that was disputed in the late 80s, whereas the original composer was William Grant Still, according to his daughter. Either way, this royalty-free song is very peppy, jazzy, and fun to listen to. Probably the most lighthearted and fun song in the whole game. This was also in the movie An American in Paris. To be frank, I'm having a hard time describing how it relates to our agents here, besides, they're a lot of fun so far. Request 13. La fille aux cheveux de lin. Sumio is still dead. With this chapter, we focus on Remy Fazil, our other federal agent. She and Yoshimitsu are discussing how they need to further investigate this matter, as it looks like a possible human trafficking ring. Remy says this is part of something codenamed Euro Mass Pro, which is interesting. According to her, it's an ongoing investigation where stolen children are the main victims of this trafficking ring. She is determined to put an end to this right here in Los Paz. Back on the ground floor, we talk to Maddie. She is Step's mother, although she's not being entirely honest at first. Remy gets her to admit she came from Eliki Island. Maddie is hiding much behind her facade. She even knows who Remy is before meeting her right here and now, despite Remy never coming to this island before today. All we can do now is head to Eliki Island and see what we can find. Arriving, we enter a large building. Remy already feels like she's been here before. The building itself is mostly empty, but we find a secret entrance to this underground laboratory. Reminds me of some of the places we visit in the Silver Case, specifically the shelter. As Remy's reporting to Yoshimitsu, she calls this place a subterranean plant and proceeds further. We find this gigantic room that's a bright white. Kinda reminds me of the hyperbolic time chamber from Dragon Ball Z. Feels appropriate, what with all this talk about warped time. So I kinda got a laugh out of this part. Have you ever played a game, or perhaps an expanded chapter of sorts, where gunplay isn't really the focus at all, but once you do get to use a gun, it's actually got some real impact to it? Even if the gunplay isn't anything special, having it take over as part of the experience adds so much, as it's not the entire focus of said game or whatnot. Some immediate examples I could think of are Conker's Bad Fur Day, the first Kidman DLC and The Evil Within, and Pizza Tower. So here you are playing as Remy, an armed special agent. This is the one scenario in the entire game where you actually get to fire a gun. And what do you use it for? Hitting numbers on a wall. There's just something so weird and dumb and hilarious how the only time you're using a gun in this entire game is in the most dissatisfying way imaginable. Anyway, we're shooting at this wall of numbers to fill out a single math equation. The idea is to use all 9 digits, a single minus, and 3 additions in order to have the equation equal 100. So it's 98 minus 76 plus 54 plus 3 plus 21. Yeah, Remy, that degree sure came in handy for simple math. Pacing around this long corridor, you'll notice some of these pods can be interacted with. They're all of the same person, although nobody we know. But they seem to know Remy, and why she came here. Welcoming her, stating this is where Step was born, and how these are backups, as they say, clones. Although the last one we interact with is a clone of Remy herself. This clone tells her she was born here, and that she needs to kill her past. Through this interaction, Remy remembers everything, and bids farewell to this lab that gave birth to her. We pan to the outside of the building as it explodes. Fading from Remy's story, we're reverted back to the night on the roof, but this time it's different, as Toriko is here to stop Sundance Shot. She asks him why he wants to shoot Sumio. He says it's just what's expected of his role, that he doesn't have any real reason, possibly hinting his self-awareness as a video game character. Toriko says that's a bad way to go about things. Over this debate, Sundance Shot agrees to reset time and let things play out, meaning Sumio lives once again. And if Sumio can find Sundance Shot, the terrorist, then he wins and Sundance Shot will disappear. Otherwise, if he can't, they're both gone. Not sure what he means by that. Either way, Sundance Shot triggers a reset. Sumio, alive again, is seen holding the same gun, then falls off the roof, only to end up back on the hotel bed. Toriko, still on the roof along with Chris, is wondering if Sumio can really save this world. She ends this chapter the only way one can. Remy discovered more than she bargained for during this trip. She thought she was on a path to uncover a human trafficking ring. I mean, she does, but also an experimental cloning facility, which we'll learn more about later on. I thought about what it means for Remy to have discovered this and see her own perfect copy tell her that she needs to kill her past. This idea of seeing your own self right in front of you can mean a lot of things, like self-discovery and hidden truths. To turn over a rock is symbolic to uncovering hidden secrets of our world, which is what Remy is doing in her escapade here. But what if she turned that rock and only saw her own face? Seeing herself could be a sign of confronting herself, her past, like Maddie implied. As I've said before, to kill your past is to confront your personal history and what parts of it are weighing you down as an individual. Perhaps Remy had a lot of baggage that we weren't exactly privy to, but this is the point where she could finally start to move on. We also got to see what is essentially the conclusion to Toriko's story. For those that have played and experienced her scenes, you might notice how, despite being presented at the end of each chapter, her run-ins with all the characters involved take place at inconsistent times. Sometimes we can see it taking place after the end of the chapters, but other times it appears to be around the middle, or maybe before Sumio's chapter even starts. But the only consistent part is the entire time she's tailing her alligator friend, Chris. These scenes are strong inferences that both Toriko and Chris have some sort of time-traveling ability, at least throughout these series of events, and perhaps Sundance Shot does as well. I also like Chris's presence here. He's a talking animal, so symbolically speaking, he could represent this sense of guidance or intuition, something to help guide Toriko throughout this ordeal and hunt for Sundance Shot. Little guy deserves just as much credit, if not more so, in finding Sundance Shot and saving Sumio from permanent death. Anyway, Toriko claims Sundance Shot is Kamui, or at the very least a type of Kamui. What this could mean is heavy. I've described in my analysis on the Silver Case that he wasn't necessarily an individual involved in the 24 Wards' politics, not entirely at least, but that he became a symbol, a martyr of sorts. This symbol or idea of Kamui is something that can be spiritually transferred or reborn onto others. This concept reaches levels that go beyond any understanding, to be frank. But we'll talk more about that after we finish going through the story. So I guess I could talk about Step for a bit, since he received a lot of attention for these past two chapters, and this aspect of cloning human beings is now wide open. Step is a mysterious individual who doesn't have too much character, but incidentally, there's some intrigue behind him from a different perspective, and that's if you've played Killer 7. The next game, Suda would go on to develop as head writer, head designer, and sole director, releasing in 2005. For those that have played Killer 7, what other tall, dark-skinned man with a side-shaved hairstyle can you think of? Many among the fanbase recognize the stark similarities between Step and Garcian, the main character of Killer 7. I think there's a lot to them that takes us beyond the realm of coincidence. Recall Ito McAllister's cameo in that game.
Oh, Mr. Smith. We've been expecting you. The top floor. Please use the elevator in the back.
He greets Garcian, who is surprised how he's immediately aware of who he is.
How do you know my name?
I remember all the faces of our guests. Even your bag, sir.
What Ito says here makes me think of how he was more than acquainted with all of the guests of Hotel Flower, Sun and Rain, knowing firsthand much of their background and traits. Despite Ito warmly greeting Garcian and even using his last name, Garcian doesn't seem aware of him. It's heavily inferred that Steppe as an individual is part of some sort of cloning experiment, just looking at how Remy described the fake Steppe that bombed the store, and Maddie describing the one she knew came from Eliki Island. Why Ito would be a part of Union Hotel in Killer 7, I can't really say right now, but I see him greeting Garcian as a nod, almost a wink to the audience that yes, we're supposed to be thinking of Steppe from Flower, Sun, and Rain at this moment. He even brings attention to Garcian's case after all. What other game has us running around as a guy in a simple clean suit lugging a case everywhere? A few other similarities I feel are worth noting. Near the end of Killer 7, we confront a younger form of Garcian. Clean face, sporting a red shirt, looking even more like Steppe than he already does. There's also the theory that Steppe was part of what federal agents were calling Euromass-Pro. Trafficking rings with child victims was a fairly prominent subject in Killer 7, bearing connections with the production of Heaven Smiles, the main enemies of the game. While seemingly organic, these creatures are not only capable of disguising themselves as people, they can explode on command or physical contact. Something I can't ignore Steppe did at the end of the previous chapter. Like a lot of connections in Suda's earlier games, there's something there, but the delivery is underhanded, somewhat ambiguous, even subtle in some ways. I just find all of that really interesting. Oh, one last thing, they said Steppe went to France before returning to Los Pas. While France is never really mentioned anywhere in Killer 7, James Howell in his written plot analysis for the game notes how Garcian sounds close to the word garçon, which means servant. And Garcian in Killer 7 was put through a brainwashing program to serve and obey beings of higher power in order to aid their political influence. Not sure how much that could relate to Steppe, just feels peculiar how often they mentioned his time in France. Anyway, the song of the day is La Fille au... Originally written by Claude Debussy, the title translates to The Girl with the Flaxen Hair, which definitely doesn't match with Remy, clearly a brunette, although maybe the point is a little debatable considering her character art. Debussy named the song after a poem written by Leconte de Lisle. From what I can tell, this poem is about falling in love with a particular girl on a summer night. A lot of its wording, at least how it's translated to English, feel very fitting for the game in general, but not exactly for Remy's chapter. Although, the game's version feels very defining, like this is the end of the story for a certain character. Like, after witnessing a revelation, they can finally put it all to rest. I think that speaks for what Remy experienced. Request 14, Trauma Ray. Still holding that gun. Sumio wakes up. Our boy's alive! Ito calls as usual, tells him he's finally revived and he'll explain more when he comes down to the front desk. Oh. No longer eating shit first thing in the morning anymore. I like to think it was Sue tripping his ass the entire time somehow. Anyway, Sumio's pondering over this endless cycle of madness he's been experiencing, trying to think how he can get out of said cycle. He also realizes Catherine is gone, and let me tell you, poor guy is totally lost without Catherine. Sumio is so helpless, he can't even pause the game or save without her. Once down at the front desk, Ito explains what transpired since Sumio got shot down on that roof. An infinite time loop of a repeating day, and Ito assures that if he just gets to the airport and stops that terrorist, all will become clear. Leaving the hotel, we run into Remy. Oh my god. A little racism to fight back the sexism. You love to see it. Anyway, Remy asks how much Sumio knows, which isn't a lot, but like Toriko, she says Sumio will be the savior of this world, this island. They get into some cheeky meta talk too. Remy's trying to get Sumio to remember his past, far into his past. She mentions the 11 children of revolution. Sumio doesn't seem to care. And with that, we're off. We jog to the ruins of the shopping center. Yoshimitsu is hanging around outside of it. He says Step had the case on him, but that the explosion sent it soaring down the road. He also mentions the number 11. So we head down the road some more and see another man in regular business attire. Right off the bat, this guy is mean as shit, but he does assure Sumio... Gabe.
What's up?
Say your catchphrase, his guest appearance.
What, you say my catchphrase?
Yeah, say your catchphrase, guest appearance for the video, go.
I'll show you the mail.
That's good. But he does assure Sumio his case is here. He retrieves Catherine, feeling whole again. This guy keeps being an asshole, thinks Sumio is the biggest ingrate. He isn't exactly a saint either, so these two going back and forth is pretty funny.
Look at that, snap it back at me right away. Oh, the state that things have fallen into.
Thanks, anyway.
I didn't hear you. You need to enunciate a loud, clear voice. You hear me, don't you?
Thank you for your help, old timer.
It's even worse than I thought. You disgust me, honestly.
You're starting to annoy me, old man.
Are
you laughing?
That's right.
Another weirdo.
The guy demands you go talk to Lady Natsuko. Who? Running back to the hotel, Sumio asks Ito where she's staying. We learn the man's name is Takaoka, and they're staying in room 408. Hoofing it up the stairs, we see Lady Natsuko in her room. She seems very passive and disinterested, doesn't care that this random guy came to her room. We get the idea something's up with the radio, and all she'll say is, mix. Back in the lobby, Ito tells us a little more about Natsuko Akai, and that the radio itself needs to be fixed. A perfect job for the recovered Catherine. Sumio has a hunch about disco, so let's go with that while we open our guide. Near the Fatboy Slim ad, hey, I get it now, we see a list of radio stations. We find Kanto Disco, bada bing bada. Of course, we don't hear nothing as Ito tells us the music plays at the fields, so we've got no choice but to hoof it back there. Ken is here to alleviate that pain a bit, even if he doesn't know it yet. Sumio talks up Ken's bicycle, and before we know it, he snatches it, making the trip feel slightly less torturous for us. We find Takaoka sweating up something real sexy while we hear a very familiar song. After some back and forth bickering, we're told to go back to Natsuko. She demands jazz this time. We make the rounds again. Guidebook shows Melody Shower, which describes itself as being non-pop, non-trendy. I guess we're supposed to figure out that's jazz, so... We run back to Ken, and he's mad. He gives us a teary-eyed bit of monologue about how much he's grown to admire Sumio, how he wants to trust him, and we're off. Sir, please, I can only get so erect. After more badgering from the fat man in a bikini, you guessed it, gonna take a bicycle back and run back to room 408. Memory, huh? Back at the radio machine, we have to deduce that by seeing one of the few stations left is titled Radio for You, that is dedicated to caller requests. In other words, songs that people remember. Memory. Pretty good. Ito tells us we gotta run back to the wheat fields. Our naughty Sumio starts trotting back, and we're here with Ken again. He's pissed. He gives us the dumbest threat I've ever heard, and before he could even finish it, we gone. Takaoka is here and delighted to hear about Natsuko and says he wants to go on a movie date with her. But where's there a theater around here? The 5th floor of the hotel, apparently. Ito says today they're playing a movie called Tonight Tonight, the key to our next puzzle that has locked the door to the theater. That, along with other made-up films, can be found in the guide. Reading the description, Tonight Tonight sounds like a weird sci-fi flick. There's no film of that name in real life, but I did find numerous songs titled Tonight Tonight, one by Smashing Pumpkins, and the official music video to it serves as an homage to the famous classic film, Trip to the Moon. Very clever, Suda. Inside of the theater, we see our favorite couple already in the front row waiting. They sure know how to pick seats. Takaoka goes on about how they met, which was in a movie theater watching this same film, how she started holding his hand 8 seconds into it, and that alone made him feel young again. He says he has every single frame of that movie's first 8 seconds burned into his mind because of that moment. Natsuko says projector, telling us where our last puzzle is. Going to the projector, Sumio states they want it set to only play the first 8 seconds of the movie, so it only makes sense to find a page in the guide about the theater itself. It states the projector runs its movies at 30 frames per second, which is odd to me, it's usually 24. Either way, just gotta multiply 30 by 8 and... Natsuko seems more lively now, really illuminating this happy couple. Takaoka apologized to Sumio for giving him such a hard time. He tells him a bit of his history, but we are not invited to that dialogue. Either way, Takaoka says he's very grateful for everything Sumio did for them. The lovers embrace, but Sumio feels something is still off. Does that even count? This is the most grueling and tedious chapter in the entire game by far. We had to run back and forth 4 times, and this really waned down Sumio's patience, even if we did get to cheat and use the bicycle a few times. I also believe this chapter has the most unique puzzles in the game that require the guide as well. What feels like an optional mission in a regular adventure game that would grant us some big fuck-ass type sword is just another day here for Sumio and the gang, emphasizing its satire on these types of games back then. This chapter focused on the odd couple Takaoka and Natsuko. While there are certainly some assumptions to be made, I think it's really cute that as far as we were told, they met in a way that screams young love. Takaoka might be a pain in the ass, but it just takes his lovely lady to soften him up. I guess even fat assholes need love and romance in order for their life to make sense. Like me! I especially love how he talks about remembering the moment they met and that those few moments mean the world to him. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to when they found their true love. Again, very human stuff. The song of the day is Traumare, part of a 13-piece composition known as Kinderszenen by Robert Schumann. Traumare gained much notoriety as it was used to close the 1947 musical Song of Love. From what I can tell, it's often associated with complicated love, perhaps adding to the uncommon coupling of Takaoka and Natsuko. But it is love, nevertheless. Request 15, Prelude à la Presse Midi d'un Phone.
Travis, hello?
Sumio wakes up. He tells Ito he's figured out the secret of the island. Talking to himself with his coffee, he believes in the idea that time has stood still. He mentions fate, referring to Takaoka and Natsuko meeting in the theater as fate itself. I think what Sumio's getting at here is that the flow of time is influenced by these individuals having a desire to keep reliving a certain moment in their life. The time they believed was a moment of fate that would change their life forever. Sumio confronts Ito. He feels much of this entire ordeal was planned from the start, mentioning how convenient it is that the guidebook itself has a solution to all of the problems he runs into. He accuses Ito of not just writing out this guidebook, but setting up the whole dang thing. Ito doesn't hesitate to admit that Sumio's right. He says that he doesn't have much faith in Sumio, and wrote out the guidebook as a means for, I suppose, anyone to eventually figure out these strings of puzzles and obstacles. Kind of a funny way to say that it doesn't take a particularly special person to figure out the tasks within the game, hence it being a video game sold on the market to begin with. Of course, this isn't the only bomb he's dropping. But just as he's about to reveal more about this charade, he's knocked out. Sue comes in, enjoying her immediate promotion. She says the couple from yesterday are waiting for Sumio, so we head there. Takaoka and Natsuko say you're in for a confusing maze just up ahead. But it isn't that confusing, more tedious if anything else. Reaching the first robot scarecrow, we need to find the page in the guide showcasing all three. Like in RPG, we need to deplete all of its HP to defeat it. The first has 20 HP, but with +8 defense. Easy. Next one has amazing defense, but not if we ignore it, like the instructions say. The last one is daunting, but it's simple math, just follow the steps as it says. And that's it for the world of RPGs. Step's little dungeon is the end of this maze. The trick is to do the opposite of what he says. We approach a nurse standing in front of a tower. She is Nurse Hannah. Chill out, Sumio. She tells Sumio about Lady Ritz. And that's pretty much it. So this is a more story-focused chapter of sorts. At this point, we're done meeting individuals that are either stuck in this endless loop they're calling life, or wasting everyone's time. If it wasn't obvious enough from the discussion with Ito, and then Sue, this is what I would call the third act of this story. We're going to discover more and more about this island, its purpose, and what Sumio needs to do to finally put this all to rest. The song of the day is Prélude à la presse midi d'un faun, another Debussy classic. It translates to Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun. What this preludes to is a story about a faun playing his flute happily across a forest and finds other mythical beings about, but fails to pursue them. These mysteries are so close, yet just beyond his reach. I think this does a good job describing where Sumio is in the story right now. Everything feels so close, but all we still keep digging up are more questions, not really grasping what's going on. Will he eventually reach those nymphs and naiads? We'll just have to keep going to find out. Request 16. Pavain por un infante defunte. Sumio wakes up, but Ito is not here to greet him. Sundance Shot enters the room, here to talk with Sumio for the first time. Huh? I guess he did enter a stall in the beginning of the game, but I'm still not sure what he means. Either way, he says this is his duty. Duty. Getting to the stall seems important. Sundance Shot says if he finds him, he'll have successfully diffused the situation. He also said Ito is lying about the day repeating itself, but instead that it's part of a program and that it's up to Sumio to release it. He also says Sumio is a child of the 11. There's that phrasing again. He tosses Sumio a die, and a lot of what he says makes it seem like the mystery of the island is within Sumio, perhaps a part of his past, and he leaves the room. The die itself is a puzzle, so we need to figure out how to solve it. Sundance Shot said the mystery of the die lies in the tradition of the ruins. So we look at the page talking about ancient ruins. Now this one is odd. If I'm understanding this correctly, it's a story about a man in black that provided knowledge and tools upon humans of the land. Like, literally. But instead of using these tools and knowledge he provided for good, they were used to attack others, wage wars, these kinds of things. Long story short, a huge cast of rain washed away many of these things and helped end these wars, while the man who provided all of the tools took everything away as he disappeared. So, despite these illustrations looking like numbers, you're not supposed to look at that. You're supposed to pay attention to how the story ended. He took everything away. The answer is literally nothing. We're immediately teleported to the tower from that last chapter. Nearby is a lady named Sundance Ritz and Nurse Hana from before. Ritz is telling us about the 11 children. As she describes, most of them have unique characteristics. Among these descriptions, we can at least note that she says 2 of them are on this island right now, one being very serious and another one she calls unstable. It's a little hard to really get the idea of who she means, but my guess would have to be Step and Remy, considering previous chapters. I'm not sure though. She says Sumio knows all about the 11th child, since it's likely he himself. She ends with saying, "Now meet with the other me," and we fade right back into Sumio's room. Sue is in the lobby. Sumio tries asking her why she and Ito have been acting so weird lately, but she ignores that and tells him that Sundance Ritz is waiting in one of the cottages nearby. Sue also says she's the medium of the island, so she has psychic powers. What that does for us, I have no clue. Getting to the cottage, we're greeted by Nurse Hana once again. She has no recollection of seeing him earlier in the chapter. Even so, she heeds some words from Lady Ritz. She says that today is a particularly special day for everyone on the island, and something alien has made its way here. She then hints how to complete this chapter, interestingly that the man who once saved this island performed the same act. As we go outside, Sundance Ritz rises from the pool, telling Sumio all kinds of things that seem to imply the act of wiping the slate of Los Past clean. At least, that's how I interpret it. We're back in the ruins. Run around this big old tower clockwise like Hannah said, and a panel opens up. Our puzzle for this chapter is once again in the page regarding the ruins. A refresher to the original story, now keeping in mind the old legend that performed the same tasks as Sumio was the same person in this story. That's all well and good, but what we need to worry about for this moment is now the picture is the solution. Just go by what you see. 8 plus 6 equals... And with that, a fucking Eva comes out of the ground and blasts an energy ball right into Eliki Island, forming a cave. Oh, and again to hit the plane. Just like with the last chapter, everything is unraveling and heading towards its conclusion at a fairly rapid pace. We're not just solving people's problems anymore, we're performing what some might call destiny. Sundance Ritz describing Sumio as one of the 11 children tells us he has a history with this island, one that he is clearly not aware of. Learning more about the ruins, the story of the legendary man that wore black, huh? Like Sue said at the end, Sumio is being controlled by fate, and it's up to him to protect Sundance Ritz from an impending doom. Sundance Ritz is interesting in the sense that she shares the same name with Sundance Shot. I believe we're meant to understand Ritz was born on this island, and Shot, the self-proclaimed terrorist, while seemingly an invader from the sky. It's worth noting that blowing up the plane itself isn't bringing harm to the island, just planes. Boy, those are probably expensive. As for the Eva, I don't know, Suda probably just thinks Evangelion is cool.
Around the time Evangelion was coming out, it was said that there's no such thing as an original work in the creative world. That made me want to create an original work.
The song of the day is Pavane por una infante defunte, or Pavane for a Dead Princess by Maurice Ravel. It's a slow, beautiful, and dreamy song. The melody is very quiet and dignified. I believe we're supposed to think of Sundance Ritz and the otherworldly nature of her character when hearing this song, especially the version used in the game. Request 17. Kill the Past. Sue wakes Sumio up. She tells him today is a special day, and boy is she right. During his morning coffee, Sue asks Sumio if he has realized the truth, but thinks he's slow. He claps back, saying that people and events are much more complicated than she thinks, and not everything should be taken at face value. Although, he also thinks that not everything needs a complete dissection or explanation either, that everything could all just be a coincidence. God, what am I doing here? Perhaps Sumio is mocking how Sue thinks literally everything happening so far has gone according to plan, down to the guidebook having the answers to all of his predicaments so far. The two feel like Sumio is close to the end of his adventure, but one thing that hasn't changed for him since the beginning? This is a job he vows to complete. With that little lecture, Sue tells him he should go to room 301. She also gives us a hint for an upcoming puzzle, a turtle. Once we get to the room, damn, fancy. He must have sprung for the premium package. Anyway, we see this old recorder on the coffee table. With our hint, we find a turtle on page 37, the same page we used to solve the first puzzle that utilized the guidebook. Looking at the settings of the sea turtle photo, it's ISO 100 with an aperture of 2.8. Therefore, the recorder begins repeating to us a single message.
Right on the boat and go to Electronic Island. Right on the boat and go to Electronic Island.
Then a very familiar song starts playing. Nurse Hana is in the room and says Sumio needs to meet with Sundance Ritz at the cottage. Down, boy. We hoof it to the cottage to speak with Sundance Ritz. She says this entire ordeal could be a dream, and that in order to open the gate and uncover the truth, he needs to learn about the legend of this island. Lady Ritz says she was born into a small ethnic group, raised by special animals, but an interloper appeared, massacring her tribe and robbing them of these special animals. She says God entered his eye. Sundance Ritz states the son of the interloper is in Los Pass with a silver eye, and that part of Kamui resides in him. This is all starting to sound familiar, right? She calls him God, but Sumio is not impressed, although calling these fairy tales is peculiar. She tells Sumio that this man knows the secret of the island and must go see him. Ritz says Sumio is destined to bring order to the island, much to his dismay. Jetting to Eliki Island, we enter the cave that was revealed in the last chapter. We endure a dumb maze, and once we reach the end, we're on a boat? A cool-ass motherfucker in shades is here. Sumio asked him for his name, but...
Damn, I know I should be mad, but that guy's just so cool.
Oh, but the intro actually spoiled it. This is Tokyo. You know, from the Silver Case. As if this song and the song playing in his hotel room weren't enough to give it away. Another case where Western players between 2008 and 2016 were severely confused. You know, all 38 of them. Tokyo Morishima. He says he's just an onlooker and implies that he's been observing Sumio throughout the whole adventure. Sumio's already up to here though, even mocking the writing a bit. Even so, our cool cat presses on. He recalls the name Sumio and how it reminds him of an old dude he used to work with, a hard ass that didn't put up with his shit. He talks about how fixated he was on a younger colleague named Sumio. No doubt talking about Tetsugoro Kusabe and Sumio Kodai, also from the Silver Case. So, this is where the translation gets a little muddled between regions. In the American version of the game, Tokyo describes Kusabe's possible homosexuality with a euphemism.
Well, this guy, he was batting for the other team, if you know what I mean. He was totally gay bones for his younger colleague.
But in the European version, he just flat out says he was gay. Sumio immediately retorts that he wasn't, giving a very obvious hint towards his own actual identity. But yeah, I'm sure it can be argued about which dialogue is better, but I find it weird that whomever was in charge of the translation for the American version felt the need to change that line. Like some asshole Bible thumper was looking over the interpreter's shoulders and they were sweating bullets while translating this chapter, and like they're just racking their brains. Come on, think. Yeah, I know, a baseball term. And the preacher looks over and goes, ah, yes, baseball, batting, yes, I totally understand. Very American and something only straight men enjoy. All of this reads great. And the translator wiped the sweat from their brow and just went back to work. I like the phrasing from My Name is Earl more myself.
I'm here to help you find a woman so that you can be happy.
Earl, I think you're trying to sell a cat to a man who fancies dogs.
But hey, Suda loves baseball, a sport that usually finds its way into his games one way or another, so at least there's that. Even so, our guy continues on, showing off his silver eye. Sumio realizes this is who Sundance Ritz was talking about. This eye has given him godly powers, but he thinks it's more like a demon's. Tokyo says this island once contained a factory that bred certain animals raised by the Sundance tribe, as Ritz was inferring. They don't state it outright, but the profile tab shows the animals were hyenas, including the one hanging out with Tokyo here. I don't know, I find it a little hard to tell what these animals were on either version from visuals alone. He says the breeding factory was trying to harvest the silver eyes these hyenas would sometimes be born with, but the place just disappeared all of a sudden. That the world has a limited amount of these special eyes, and the elites of the world try to get their hands on them. He also states it grants eternal life. Tokyo came here to investigate the destroyed factory, but as soon as he did, time became warped. He believes it's due to his eye being in close proximity with another silver eye, and this is where Sumio, the searcher, comes into play. He wants to find the person who has the second silver eye and scoop it out of them. And in the case the player didn't get it yet, Sumio calls him by his full name. He wants Tokyo to restore the passage of time. Tokyo says he just needs to connect Catherine to his eye and it'll be done. Sumio deduces that Tokyo wrote an article for the guidebook, so that's our lead. We find an article on page 47. He says he started this new journal the day after a life-changing event. The way the rest of this article reads feels like a cheeky joke about how he feels compelled to write this for the sake of someone he doesn't actually know. You know, it's kind of like he's saying this is only being written for us to solve another puzzle. The solution, by the way, is the date which that life-changing event was. He said it was the day before this entry of December 31st, 1999. Therefore, solving this causes the gate to open. Yes, Sundance Ritz was talking about a literal gate. Tokyo says the two will never meet again. He mentions a blank memo left by someone, and I'm pretty sure he's talking about Morichikawa from the Silver Case, who, if you recall, was getting to the bottom of the Shelter Kids program himself before he was killed by Tetsu. All Morichikawa had left to say to Tokyo was to keep at it and don't give up. Tokyo considers his current state of immortality to be torture. He just wants a normal life again. At the end of the conversation, Sumio says to Tokyo, "Hang in there, Bunya," which puzzled me a bit. Who's Bunya? I learned the existence of Tsukai Abare Bunya, a decades-old manga about a beefy journalist and news reporter that would often resort to violence if it meant getting the latest scoops. I can't find any sort of translation, so I'm just relying on the descriptions from other sites regarding this manga. Either way, it's a cute reference since Tokyo's really gone great lengths for his due diligence in the past, as we've seen. In the US version of FSR, this one line was changed to a weird Superman reference, although I kinda get it, since Clark Kent was a journalist for the Daily Planet, and he punched people too. With that, Sumio demands to be taken to the final day, which Tokyo obliges. Okay, Tsu, jeez. I guess there's a lot to unpack. This is the only chapter that involves Tokyo Morishima, making it all the more puzzling to see him show up in the second intro. Why spoil the surprise? His presence in this game also emphasizes the collaborative effort between Suda and Uka, as they both clearly consider him to be the character that only Uka can write, at least as a lead. I guess I don't want to get too lost in the weeds. I expect everyone still watching to have played all of the Silver Case, or at least watch my analysis video where I dove deeply into nearly everything the game presented, including the character of Tokyo Morishima. The skinny of it is that he's an investigative reporter that was researching the Kamui Urahara phenomenon, but in the end discovered he had familial ties with the Shelter Kids program, a child trafficking ring with the intent to build a perfect society through mind control. Part of this revelation included learning that his father, Mayor Hachisuka, which was actually his grandfather that attained the Silver Eye and killed his own son to steal his identity, was whom Sundance Ritz was talking about, Umenosuke. This man came to Eliki Island to attempt harvesting the hyenas to gain more silver eyes. The number of silver eyes he managed to harvest is never really known. It's possible he was also the man who massacred the Sundance people as well, like Suda mentioned. Something else not exactly stated in the story, the man we didn't recognize in the pods is named Sundance Mike, which tells me their own people, possibly through DNA left behind on their corpses, were used as stock for the cloning facility. I find this chapter very gratifying for how it weaves this game into the Silver Case's world. What better title for this chapter than Kill the Past? I especially love Tokyo in this scenario. He feels like the same relatable weirdo, but now a little too cool for school with his new sense of power. It genuinely feels like we're picking right back up from the night he left the 24 wards in order to try learning more about the Silver Eye he possesses. Now that we've looked over this chapter, we can dissect what was shown in the bonus placebo chapter that Uka wrote for the Silver Case's 2016 remake. This short chapter discusses mostly on what the Silver Eye is capable of, hinted by the anonymous email he receives that questions what our planet would be like if we weren't able to die, and stating how horrible of a world that would be. Like in Flower, Sun, and Rain, Tokyo considers this Silver Eye and its power to be a curse. There's also the ghostly girl known as Catherine. Wearing this gray attire makes me think she's supposed to represent Sumio's case. Perhaps not in a literal sense, but the sense of its abilities and how Sumio using it will help enlighten Tokyo in the future. In this scene, Catherine even gets close and begins to decipher what the Silver Eye is capable of, stating she read Tokyo's mind. This makes me think how we literally solve problems by connecting Catherine with the obstacles we run into, including people. She's deciphering him. Tokyo calls the cycle of life and death a program and states the Silver Eye suspends said program, at least for the individual. Think of it this way, the program we mentioned can be simplified to just time. Time is why we grow, and time is why we die. We are all given a limited amount of time, and once it's out, that's it. The Silver Eye doesn't make you immortal, but also suspends this sense of time. It stops being a factor in your life, hence you don't age and you don't die. I think with all this in mind, we're starting to see what was causing this warped sense of time in Lost Pass, at least logically speaking. Everything connects back to the Silver Eye. Request 18, An American in Paris. This is the final chapter. Sumio wakes up. Over his coffee, Sumio's thinking about Tokyo releasing this island from its warped freezing of time. Down the lobby, not only is Ito here to greet us, but Sue and Stuart as well. They're all here to say goodbye. Sumio seems frustrated with them, understandably. They begin to explain that Los Paz is a completely artificial island, not in a sense that this wasn't naturally part of the globe at some point, just that most of its resources and such were manufactured and placed, ruining its original ecosystem. You know, like a city. They said the purpose of this resort was to hide the facility that was breeding hyenas deep underground by the jurisdiction of an institution that goes by the name Elbow. For what it's worth, this code name has come up before. And after.
Whoever's listening to this tape, destroy it.
Low data, the social security code, tempo, the civilian class.
Doesn't exist.
Seo states Ito concocted a plan to destroy this island once and for all. The bomb that's been armed to the plane over and over was meant for the island itself. Sue claims the terrorist, likely Sundance Shot, is the one behind that. Stuart says your car is waiting for you just beyond the gate, but to talk to Maddie at the diner beforehand. I'm gonna miss these goofs. Maddie doesn't say much, besides also bidding farewell. I'm glad we got to say goodbye to her, though. Oh, hey dude. Ken is also here. He brought us our car. Sumio and Ken say goodbye, and I find it odd how he's talking like they aren't about to blow up the island. Maybe some of them aren't in on it. Driving down and getting to the airport, we run into some weirdo. He says he'll explode if Sumio doesn't back off. But Stefan is here to help. Sumio ain't too happy about it. Stefan says he created this bomb and knows how to disarm it. Why did he make this? Who knows? He calls them fantasistas, so their weird stilted animations and helmets make me think of foosball players. Stefan says shutting down all of his fantasistas will trigger the mother bomb, destroying this island. Saying goodbye, he steals your car. Solving the first android bomb, we enter the airport, and now we've got multiple floors of math problem android bozos to deal with. It's all very simple stuff, and as far as I can tell, is pretty well randomized. Of all the playthroughs I've done, I've never run into the same math problems, at least not as far as I could recall. The absolute repetition at play here reminds me of the triangle towers near the end of the silver case. It's something Suda tends to include when it comes to the near end of the games he directs. Anyway, the bombs have all been disarmed. Do you feel accomplished? Do you feel like a mighty hero? No. We make it to gate 2, which is our flight. We run into an attendant and stewardess. Hey, don't they look familiar? The captain suggests that we use the facilities before the flight. Very well, we try to enter the stall and an old switcheroo happens? I don't know. Back to the flight entrance. Uh-oh, it's Remy and Yoshimitsu! We revert back to Toriko, who's nearby. She reaches Sumio, claiming he's Kamui, calling Kamui a strategic weapon meant to camouflage into society, or move among humans, as she says. Toriko tells Sumio to wait right there, as a friend of her father's will release him. We go back to the room and it's Sumio again? Now we've got 2 Sumios on the scene. And here we have our final puzzle of the game. Sumio must plug Catherine into himself. And it's just your birthday again. I might be reading this wrong, but I believe this is conveying the Sumio we were just jacked into was actually Sundance Shot. If we're to believe he can manipulate time, and from what Tokyo suggested, we just removed his silver eye. As he stated, doing so will put an end to all of this. And this was the last puzzle. Therefore, time's flow has been restored. Sundance Shot explains that he is among 16 Sumio clones. He's saying a lot of weird jargon, but from what I gather, this remaining Sumio is carrying the memories of all the Sumios we've been playing as throughout. They've essentially been getting replaced with each new chapter that we start. He says he, as in the current one we're playing as, is the original Sumio, the one destined to go back home and take everything he's learned with him. Sundance Shot claims your destiny is to reach Step once again. Really strong implications that he's of some sort of significant importance, but otherwise I'm not sure. Sundance Shot says he chooses to stay here, as this island was part of his original Sundance tribe. Therefore, he wants to go down with it. The agents order you to get on that damn plane. Yep, no final boss, no big fight, of course, but on the plane, it's Peter. Says he found who he was looking for, and like Sumio, he's ready to go home. Sumio feels he'll never forget what he experienced here, as Peter says this plane is heading to the real world. Sumio describes the separation of paradise and the real world. Truly, he was enamored by the beauty of Lost Pass. And the credits begin to roll. Of course, we've got a mid-credits scene, would you believe? Yeah, dorks, Suda was doing MCU shit before MCU was even a thing. Hell, other movies did it before MCU. Anyway, couldn't find another seat, Sumio? I guess it is a lonely flight. Peter says the person he was looking for this entire time was you, as in Sumio, and that there was never really any Sumio Mondo, that he knows better. He claims the planned explosion was all a lie too. Frankly, there's a lot of flip-flopping going on, and all we can really do is go with it. Just like before, huh? Peter seems to know a lot. He says Sumio will recall everything in due time. This right here is a little translation error, at least according to Steel Ball Runner. He's supposed to say, "It's me, Sumio." Quite a bad mistake if you ask me. But after that, Peter says the case hasn't finished yet. Case? And here's the last big reveal. Peter was Tetsugoro Kusabi all along, here to claim his 50,000 yen. This time he ain't asking, he's demanding, as he and Sumio originally agreed upon at the beginning of the game. I guess this helps explain why Toriko was here to begin with, just helping her dad out on his mission. The ending text morphs into the style we first saw in the Silver Case, confusing virtually all English players for a solid 8 years or so. Who the fuck is that supposed to be? You all must have collectively asked back in 2008. However, this couldn't be more appropriate as Sumio Mondo is no longer with us, reverting back to our fallen detective from the Silver Case, Sumio Kodai. There's some last bits of text describing more of the hyena breeding plant, which kind of reminds you of the walls of text we were treated in the beginning of the Silver Case. Was that intentional? Perhaps as intentional as Tetsugoro once again chilling with the main character by the end of the game, spilling out expository that's arguably imperative to arguably understanding what had happened. It's stated that Lost Pass Island as we know it has vanished, and this was all according to Elbow's plan, as the secret organization considered their breeding project to be a success, and the single hyena with Tokyo contains the key to continuing a new Mass Pro mission. It also says Ito McAllister, who was part of Elbow, disappeared. He didn't die, he's just gone. Now you might be wondering, what is Sumio Kodai doing here? Wasn't he serving a prison sentence for domestic terrorism? How on earth is he here mucking about on an island and even going so far as reuniting with Tetsugoro Kusabi less than 2 years later? The answer? Don't worry about it. Suda has been asked straight up how Sumio got out, but he won't give us any real answer, so don't worry about it. I think the return of Sumio Kodai emphasizes that while helping various people with their problems that stagnated their lives, Sumio was only doing so in order to keep running from his own problems, to extend the stagnation of coming to terms with the quandaries of his own life. I also find it interesting that the likes of him and Tetsugoro Kusabi found themselves in the middle of a project being directed by Elbow once again. With that said, it adds at least a crumb of more context why someone like Daizaburo Kai would be dwelling in this island in the first place, already having deep connections with that secret organization. The revelation that we are playing as Sumio Kodai also brings a lot of instances into perspective. The beginning of the game had a puzzle that showed the sign of rebirth, as Sumio abandoned his identity for a new one. Sister Phantom talking about how one with this deep darkness in their heart can attract evil spirits. Him showing interest when Yuri mentioned the shelter. Even Sumio learning about the massacre that occurred in Lost Pass and compared it to a fairy tale. Like how he described in the Silver Case, fairy tales are forms of crime. A lot of these little instances that make more sense coming from him. Also, naturally, rewarding replays, at least for fans that had already played the Silver Case. Tiny little thing to add, this makes me think of Yayoi and how she has a different last name from her character in Moonlight Syndrome. Perhaps after the events of that game, she tried to cast away her past the same way Sumio did, looking at Lost Pass as a way of being reborn, starting over. I was also confused about the time loop thing, considering the conflicting statements near the end of the game from the likes of Tetsu and Sundance Shot. With that said, I'll let Suda explain this one for a bit of clarity.
From the outside, Sumio does look like he only spent 1 day, or more precisely, 2 days and 1 night, on Lost Pass Island. The real Sumio went to sleep and woke up in the last chapter. The remaining 15 days are the same over and over again. The one behind everything is Tokyo, the man with the silver eye. That 1 day does complete an entire cycle, but time, broadly speaking, doesn't. This is the meaning of Tokyo's words, the will of God. However, the cycle of life itself does physically experience those 15 days, even though the date does not change. As a result, Mondo ends up absorbing a huge amount of information, and it is obvious that there are other people involved with the flow of time as well. Then how come they didn't notice anything? This is the power of the place known as Paradise.
It adds to the idea that a paradise or vacation can help people forget about the passage of time, at least briefly. Sumio's internal hardships did not end in the Silver Case. Despite accomplishing the goals he and the other Mikumo boys had, there was still this darkness festering inside of him. A darkness he tried to get away from by accepting this mission in Lost Pass. Flying back to, assumedly, Japan, he's put an end to his own time loop in order to face the darkness he's been running away from. Oh yeah, as for the song, I think An American in Paris really captures the overall feeling of the game. The song makes me think about the act of working on something for long periods of time, the sense of repetition, a series of monotonous tasks, but it also has this really goofy vibe going on as well, almost as if you're getting loopy and starting to lose your mind. I think this song as a whole encapsulates the feeling that the devs were trying to invoke onto the player. This colorful, demented, unique adventure that hits you with these instances of revelation and madness. But it's also funny and kooky when it wants to be, as it takes you through all these twists and turns. I want to talk more about the warped sense of time and the idea of paradise, but we'll get to that in a bit. Let's keep looking over this story as a whole experience. So, what did Sumio learn during his adventure in Lost Pass? Not much. Well, that's not entirely true. I guess he learned a lot about the origin of the Silver Eye and perhaps even the actual origins of himself. While he considers himself born in Japan, I think it can be argued that even that information could be falsified. That's what a lot of these games like to say, including the Silver Case. Still, much of this game, to me, was just a means of Sumio trying to run away from his problems, ward off his inner demons. But he couldn't hold them off forever. As I've described in my analysis on the Silver Case, Sumio was unable to kill his past, and resorted to running away from it. His past never caught up with him because it truly never left him. At least, according to Suda's little ramble during an interview.
The whole meaning of the Silver Case, and everything that happened in it, are all kind of concentrated inside the case that Sumio carries around.
Of course, Suda admits he kinda just pulled this out of his ass, but I think it's an interesting way to look at it. After everything Sumio committed in the Silver Case and what he went through, he has a lot of baggage. Catherine, the case he insists on carrying everywhere as well as his means to make progress in whatever situation he's in, is his baggage in physical form. Catherine being a literal silver case is so fitting when you put it that way, which is probably why he said that. This could also relate even further to Garcian, who carried around a large case wherever he went, which he would come to realize housed all of the weapons of the Killer 7 members, the same members he killed, memories he was repressing the entire time. Sumio is in this state of mind where, despite his stubbornness, he isn't going to ignore someone in need of help. That was proven time and again as he came across these strangers. He always did what he could to help them. Even after it got him drop-kicked, that didn't deter him from providing kindness to these individuals. And I think him trying to run away from the darkness within was a motivator of that. He helped them, and that in turn helped him repress the overgrown darkness festering in his soul.
Why are you helping me?
Because my life is a mess right now, and I compulsively take care of other people when I don't know how to take care of myself.
Killing the past isn't really Sumio's thing, and a half-hearted resolution is no good. Facing the past itself is being able to kill it, so he's still not ready.
But some of you are probably still befuddled by the story. Why did all of FSR transpire this way? Is it just nonsense, or was there a purpose behind Sumio being put through this cycle of madness? Was there a purpose for all of these characters, their struggles, and this theme of absolute repetition? It's hard to say. There's a lot of absurdity at play, where for a lot of it, you can say there was no real point. Although, I can direct you to one absurdly large video by Macro Phones on the concept of absurdity being presented in various video games, including FSR, which he describes the story and its presentation in ways I never considered. This video goes into great detail on absurdity in various video games. But anyway, let me try to condense the story. That might put some things into perspective. Sumio entered Los Paz with his history of criminalization. He is commissioned by a police unit for a mission, possibly through a connection with Tetsu since he was on the island with him, albeit in disguise. Sumio goes through this Groundhog Day cycle where he fails his objective over and over again, except, of course, it wasn't him, but multiple clones of him. He saw the original Sumio Kodai come out of the bathroom at the end of the game, leading us to assume he was stuck in there for the majority of the campaign. Perhaps that's why we saw Sundance Shot enter the same restroom near the beginning. Maybe he felt the real Sumio was nearby right then and there. Or maybe he was the reason he was stuck. It's hard to say. But the most important thing, for all intents and purposes, Sumio's chapters ended with the decree of failure screaming in his face. Stripping down and putting aside all the espionage and underbelly of this dark mystery that is Eleki Island, the Silver Eyes, etc., we're looking at the most basic aspect of this story. We see Sumio help various people with their struggles, the things that are weighing them down, the things causing problems in their lives. But while he does manage to help them out, every chapter consistently ended with his own failure. He was given this important mission but fails it over and over again. The 14th request is what really made me start thinking, what is the real point of showing us the plane exploding so many times? I'm not really one to argue who was or wasn't telling the truth about a time loop. The idea of it alone is what's important to me right now. During request 14, Takaoka kept talking about how those 8 seconds of the movie, an element of that moment in his life, were very important to him, how those 8 seconds meant the world to him, how he'll never forget every single frame of those 8 seconds. Takaoka was enjoying this sense of paradise, at least for that moment, where he got to relive it over and over again, as the film's first 8 seconds were being repeated. Of course, this cuts to footage of Sumio's failure like the end of every chapter. Curiously enough, this projected clip also lasted about 8 seconds. I think seeing these two moments right next to each other is supposed to hint at their similarity. The day wasn't literally repeating itself, but to Sumio, it felt that way. Every single day, he had this failure rubbed in his face as the world of Los Paz kept reminding him, he's a fuck-up. Much of his life, he has lived as a fuck-up. Have you ever had this immense sense of defeat over something you perhaps failed at? A bad job interview, your dream date fizzling out, or maybe the moment you said the wrong thing to someone and messed up a friendship for a while. Or maybe you got into a car accident you could have avoided if you just turned slightly harder, hit the brakes sooner, whatever. And how long does that haunt you? Days? Weeks? More? It's in your head. You can't stop thinking about it. Your failure mutates into a nightmare that won't end. As I've said before, Sumio failed to kill his past in the Silver Case. He was not able to follow where the rest of his friends went, successfully killing their past while also ending their own lives. 2 of the 3 Mikuma boys avenged the spirit of the girl they loved and left this world as they completed their life goal, perhaps a means to reunite. Sumio was denied that, being put under arrest before he could join his friends in, what some might say, paradise. Why he didn't just commit suicide on his own, I can't say. Perhaps part of him feels like doing that isn't the right way to go. Or maybe he feels he still has some people left to live for in hindsight. Regardless, he came here to Los Paz, this manufactured island selling itself as a paradise. This was a job, but I think he considered this a vacation of sorts, getting so far away from the 24 wards, away from all the people he had relationships with. So he thought. I think it's also worth pointing out, Sumio usually watches the explosion from afar. This visualization that he failed to stop the plane from exploding as it lights up the sky. Seeing this image burned into my head as much as it was probably burned into Sumio's, I can't help but think this is supposed to be a direct reference to the end of the parade chapter in the Silver Case. He witnessed the explosion he was supposed to be in, the one that freed the spirit of the girl he loved, knowing he failed to kill his past that he was sure would die if he let himself die in said explosion. Perhaps the visual of a distant explosion now represents how much of a failure he saw himself as. At least, that's how I take it. All this talk of vacations in paradise made me consider the idea of that. My most recent vacation was summer of 2022. Me and my now fiance were gifted 2 tickets to a week-long Caribbean cruise. For the majority of the time, I had no signal on my phone and no way to connect to the internet. They wanted some bullshit like $20 per day or something for just my phone to get spotty Wi-Fi. Fuck that. As yet another millennial that's terminally online, it was kind of strange at first. For these long stretches of time, literally days, nothing else mattered. My jobs, my channel, the news, none of these aspects of my life I was used to being constantly present had any grip on me while I was on this vacation. It legitimately felt like time stood still for a moment in my life. I think this is what Suda was trying to express with Flower, Sun, and Rain, in a way. But while I enjoyed my time on this vacation, I knew it was something that couldn't last forever. I didn't want it to last forever. I had to get back home and tend to my responsibilities, my family, my jobs, my future. A lot of the game's themes is about paradise and how it puts people in the state of stillness, a period where nothing else matters to you at that moment. A real vacation from your life. Suda has said as much, describing why he wanted this sense of time stopping and days repeating in the game.
Even if the Silver Eye didn't stop time, the resort itself erases the sensation of the passage of time. Paradise basically makes time disappear. I only made a few abstract allusions to that idea, so I hope the players can catch on to it.
Perhaps that could reflect on the gameplay as well. Flower, Sun, and Rain gave you a new kind of activity with each chapter that usually involved different people and a different location. This could be compared to a planned vacation where your days start and end the exact same way, but you're dedicating the day to a specific activity that's being offered because part of you just needs to feel like this vacation is worth it, that you've enjoyed its fruits as much as possible, that it wasn't just spent sleeping and relaxing, even when it probably should have been just that. There's a weird repetition when it comes to many vacations, especially ones where you're in a place completely foreign to you and you want to experience as much of it as you can. It continues to amaze me how often the folks at Grasshopper make absolute repetition so incredibly endearing in many of their games, but most especially in this one. But back to the discussion of failure. I further believe this is an important part of the narrative due to the struggles of all the characters you'd come to help. They've all felt like they've failed in one way or another. Crasher failing his match, Maria failing her work duties, Seiji failing to follow up on his commitment. These individuals are much like Sumio in their own ways, so helping them in their time of need feels very fitting. While the game doesn't tell us who may or may not have survived the destruction of Lost Pass, I like to think that many of these folks did leave beforehand and were able to enjoy their lives from here on out, thanks to this dork wearing a formal black suit in the middle of a sunny resort island. Thanks to Sumio Kodai, these folks were able to kill their past, but our guy here is left to continue dwelling with his own. Another character I feel is worth talking about, at least a little bit, Sundance Shot. He was causing much of this island's troubles, possibly as an operative for Elbow, as the Silver Case revealed corporations such as the FSO were a facade that acted as one of multiple fronts to hide Elbow, all while somehow being a clone of Sumio. Like I've always said, seeking absolute consistency with Grasshopper's games is folly. Throughout the squabbles between him, Sumio, and Toriko, she accused him of being Kamui Uehara. This is all still confusing, but I think it's worth thinking about why they would make such a claim. Let's think back to how I discussed Kamui Uehara as a character in the Silver Case. He isn't a sole individual, but an idea, or rather, he became one. The original Kamui was being propped up as this assassin that performed political killings, but he was only a fall guy, someone to blame for the public eye. Regardless, these acts started forming him into a symbol, especially after his death, and the powers that be wanted to create more like him, hence the Shelter Kids program. This was meant to create not just more obedient citizens like Kamui, but also begin the creation of what they considered a utopia. So the Kamui we chased around for a bit throughout the Silver Case was already given this reputation of a serial killer, although just like the original, he didn't actually kill anyone. When he was slain by special forces in front of the world of the 24 wards, he became a martyr of sorts. People continued to empower that symbol of rebellion, of disobedience, something that's happened in the real world for literal centuries. It's also worth emphasizing that Flower, Sun, and Rain implies the original Kamui Uehara was from Los Pas, perhaps a member of the Sundance tribe? That's the only way I can imagine Sundance Ritz knowing about him. Much of the facility's Euro Mass Pro project appears to have direct connection with the Shelter Kids program of the 24 wards, so I don't think that's a stretch to say. So his name's being thrown around, accusing his spirit of embodying the likes of Sumio and another Sumio. What all this really means is that Kamui is more than a person, much more. He's this sense of bloodthirst and rebellion, the spirit of a person that wants to wreck the status quo, but tends to be held down by those of higher power. I think Macrophones, who's written various essays regarding Suda's games, describe Kamui eloquently in this lengthy analysis. So I'll just let him explain Kamui better from these snippets.
The metaphorical sense is that this savior Kamui, no longer a particular person, is the criminal information of revolution against the oppressive power structure. The savior Kamui is also the role characters can assume to violently overturn existing circumstances by fighting and confronting the facts of the past, rather than denying or hiding them, to move on into the light of possibility. Characters who are not Shelter Kids are capable of being the savior Kamui. It's dependent on the information the characters possess.
This kind of thinking harks back to what I said, how Kamui is this martyr of sorts. Here's another bit from that essay.
Flower, Sun, and Rain depicts consciousnesses being transferable between the bodies of some people in Kamui's ethnic group. Since most of the Mondo's Sumios survive, and multiple Remis and Sundance Mikes are shown living simultaneously, this is possible without the death of the previous body, implying Kamui could simultaneously exist in multiple people as a set of memories, mirroring the sense in which Kamui exists as the information people possess. In Chapter 17, Lady Ritz, the elder of the Sundance tribe, describes a god entering the Silver Eye Uminosuke stole, and Tokyo calls it a demon, possibly referring to Kamui/Ayame. Uehara Kamui includes Kamui like the names of many Ainu deities, e.g. Ape Kamui, Kotankor Kamui. Utagawa Hiroshi's paper, The Sending Back Rite in Ainu Culture, quotes Kitakamai Taro, quote, "The term Kamui is often translated as God, but what the concept really represents is a spiritual being that appears in the Ainu, human, world, clad in the outer form of animals such as bears, owls, and salmon, plants such as monkshood, diseases such as smallpox, and natural phenomena such as fire and lightning." End quote. A Kamui may reside in an animal or object, but is not the animal or object. This physical form, called the Hayokbe, is a temporary costume the Kamui wears while visiting the human world, as in the famous Iomante, the ceremony in which a bear that the community has raised is butchered and the Kamui inside the animal returns home.
That last bit makes me think about how Sundance Shot was first a replica of Sumio, reverting back to the Sundance Shot form that we know, and choosing to stay in Los Pas, or his home, as it was destroyed. With the multiple layers of absurdities and paranormal activity we've seen so far in both The Silver Case and Flower, Sun, and Rain, I don't think it's a stretch to say this is the form of Kamui has taken at this point. A god of sorts that can be transferred across multiple beings and, in a way, possesses them through both physical and spiritual means. I'd like to thank Macrophones for his brilliant writing. Please check out his essay sometime. It's a trip. And I guarantee that nobody else on the planet has dove into the concept of Kamui as deeply as he has. Just keep in mind it covers pretty much all of Suda's portfolio, so play all of the games he directed first before doing so. People like to compare Suda51 to a handful of filmmakers. The usual one I hear is pairing him with Quentin Tarantino, and he's even addressed this during interviews previously. To be honest, I don't agree with the notion at all. The film director that Suda is second most compared to would probably be David Lynch. That makes more sense to me, as Suda is clearly inspired by the man's work. Not that unique for a Japanese creative, Twin Peaks was a big hit over there. But anyway, among all the games Suda directed, I think Flower, Sun, and Rain is the most Lynch-inspired piece he's done. Because just like David Lynch's most renowned work, which is Twin Peaks, the resort and its tropical beauty has this sense of serenity that makes it seem so cozy and relaxing, but there's a dark underbelly to it, mostly hidden away from the sight of the common folk, until it finally begins to bubble onto the surface. A deep-rooted darkness that's being slowly discovered by our protagonist, as well as other folks dwelling about. But at the same time, the characters and their dialogue are pretty human, and funny as all hell throughout. Nearly all of the pieces Suda has directed have this essence to them that people can argue is Lynchian, but I think Flower, Sun, and Rain is where it's at its most apparent. However, it's never named at any point where Suda discusses how he came up with the game, citing the miracle of Joe the Petrel and a specific episode of The X-Files as direct inspirations. The miracle of Joe the Petrel is about a man known as Umitsubame Joe, a half-Filipino Yakuza grunt that shot and killed a mob boss after said boss's crew murdered his friend. He leaves for the Philippines in order to avoid getting killed by said mob, but he also avoids his past in a sense.
南へ行きなさるか。人は皆南から来たと申します。地の果て、海の果てには楽園もありましょう。
He begins life anew in this mysterious tropical land as he comes to learn more about this island and perhaps even a bit of his own past he's not aware of. He even changes his name as he arrives at this tropical paradise. You're starting to see what Flower, Sun, and Rain shares with this movie, right? The other main inspiration was The X-Files, a show about two FBI agents, Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, that investigate cases of the more paranormal variety. He was specifically inspired by Season 6, Episode 14, titled Monday. And there are some pretty clear elements of such. The episode focuses on a time loop where the same day keeps repeating. A man's robbing a bank, strapped with dynamite, while Mulder and Scully try to stop the robber. However, every time the agents die in the situation, often from an explosion, the day resets, and this is repeated a number of times throughout the episode, but every time it does, the people involved begin to recall what happened previously, but also unsure if what they're recalling was just a dream or a sense of deja vu. All the meanwhile, the robber's girlfriend is trying to stop this from happening in an attempt to get everyone out of this time loop. Earlier I was talking about Flower, Sun, and Rain having this aspect of failure emphasized regarding the game's main objective and the character of Sumio. The idea of repeating the specific day that ends with an explosion until the people involved do the right thing is present in this episode. The day also repeats, with the first thing being Mulder waking up in the morning. There's also other elements and characterizations in the episode that I think Suda drew inspiration from. I also couldn't ignore this.
If what you're saying is true, how come I don't remember it? How come you're the only one?
That's gotta be 50 times you've asked me that.
51, what's the answer?
I also watched An American in Paris, a 1951 musical, as I think it must have been some sort of inspiration, seeing multiple songs featured in Flower, Sun, and Rain were popularized as part of this film's soundtrack. Funny enough, it starts with us peering into the start of the main character's day as he wakes up. A struggling artist from New Jersey that decided to find a career in a foreign country, eventually finding his place among the people as the charm of this little town enamored him. He, also breaks into song a bunch of times.
Wonderful. It's marvelous.
Of course, it's also worth thinking about what games did Flower, Sun, and Rain manage to inspire after its release. There's some indie devs out there that have made notable titles inspired by Grasshopper's library. The most significant one that reminds me a bit of Flower, Sun, and Rain would be Paradise Killer, a game that emphasizes on exploring this world that feels very flourished and dreamy, but also empty at the same time, while chatting with colorful characters in order to take in the story. The similarities are very striking, but what about the idea of Flower, Sun, and Rain inspiring works in Suda's own portfolio? It's no mystery that as soon as Suda and his team finishes a project, it'll go on influencing what they do next. We saw plenty of FSR seep into Killer 7, after all. All this talk of inspiration reminds me of this video from Waypoint. It was a 2-minute micro-analysis of Flower, Sun, and Rain, describing how the game was mechanically designed to antagonize the player.
This isn't Skyrim, this isn't Fallout. The point isn't to have a good time while looking around interesting locations. The point, I think, is that this game hates you. It counts every one of your steps, so you know exactly how much time you've wasted.
It's an interesting way to think about this experience. If people can say Drakengard's combat and presentation was an ironic play on the very concept of action games, I don't see why this can't be a possible explanation to Flower Sun and Rain's design. The video ends with a statement that really stuck with me hearing it now.
There was a point when it felt like Suda51 could do anything, that he was unpredictable, that he was really this punk rock star of games. He was putting out things that didn't make sense, but in a way that touched people and made them want to make weird stuff too. I just can't help but wonder what the old Suda would do with the new Suda's budget.
This video was made in 2017 as Grasshopper was at the tail end of their high-profile game pipeline. Well, Austin, wherever you are, I hope you finally got to see just that in No More Heroes 3. What? There's something there. The excessive trotting across Sunbeam locations that are considerably barren with little keeping you company, the rough visuals, this theme of an endless cycle and everlasting duty that even involves the main character waking up from slumber constantly throughout his endurance, usually once, sometimes twice per chapter as a sign of starting anew. Both games feature a misgendered talking animal with no explanation as to why. The fact that both protagonists get killed by their twin and essentially brought back to life shortly after. Both intermissions involve playing as a different character. The protagonist's complete lack of interest in learning about his past. Both games referencing a line from Rocky out of nowhere. Both adventures taking the time to mock RPG design where you essentially break the rules in order to win. Both games end with a ridiculous twist that emphasizes the protagonist has not received any real sense of closure. References that derive from really nerdy shit. You're mad that Travis gushed about Miike films for minutes on end? How about Ito McAllister going on and on about some fucking soccer game, partida de fútbol, soy colombiano, that happened years ago? What? Just because you're not as into sports, you don't see this as being equally dorky? Because it is. Pro wrestlers, superheroes, manga, Sentai stuff. It's all out there in the open for both of these games. Analyzing Flower Sun and Rain as much as I have, I am genuinely convinced that No More Heroes 3 is intentionally designed and written to be similar to it. I don't think these parallels are coincidental. People would describe No More Heroes 3 as really quirky, usually in a derogatory sense, but Flower Sun and Rain is quirky as fuck. In a flattering sense. They both are. I think Flower Sun and Rain is Suda's quirkiest, funniest, most eccentric game in his directing career, challenged only by the No More Heroes games, including 3. I also think the underwhelming graphical output from both games is especially funny to me. Judging from everything Suda has said about Flower Sun and Rain's production, the low-end models and textures weren't some intentional creative choice. It was a constraint issue within the team, as well as the allotted time and budget they received for the game. Both of these are a matter of circumstance. Suda and his team have provided stunning artistry and visual appeal that managed to strive through hardware limitations. Once. But I think most of their games, especially those directed by Suda, they're more like, fuck it, the game will look the way it does as long as we can finish it. If not the majority of their library, I think that's something we can say about these two games. I also can't help but notice some of his quotes regarding Flower Sun and Rain's production sound just as applicable to No More Heroes 3.
The quantity of movement is seen as a problem of filling in empty spaces. The space in the game is a fictional world, but I certainly want to have the players spend some time in paradise. I figured that strolling through paradise would need calm sounds in a comfortable setting, but nothing more than that. As long as you have the powers of sounds and images, there'll be no need to fill in those empty spaces.
Perhaps this could have been expressed better if there were scenarios that didn't let Travis use his motorbike. But hey, the first game did that. Maybe if they made more areas incompatible with the bike like in Call of Battle. I also find it funny that both No More Heroes 3 and Flower Sun and Rain share this very specific line.
You hit me! Not even my dad has ever hit me!
But that I'm more willing to chalk up to coincidence. Fans even noticed a couple motifs that were similar to what we saw in FSR as well. And back to the X-Files episode I was talking about earlier, a character described what was happening in a really peculiar way.
Every time I tell you there's going to be a robbery, you run in there to try to stop it, and that's when things go bad. We're all in hell. I'm the only one who knows it.
And as I've described previously, I believe part of the purpose of No More Heroes 3 was to depict Travis stuck in this sense of hell where he kept waking up to the same shit on repeat and endlessly fighting. Seeing as how this episode was a direct inspiration to Flower, Sun, and Rain, it has convinced me further that this was the headspace Suda was trying to get in for that game as well. Just like how Suda stated Killer 7 was a geopolitical retelling of the Silver Case's core story, I think No More Heroes 3 is, in a lot of ways, Suda revisiting the core that created Flower, Sun, and Rain's narrative as well as general game design, but with an action game molded around it. You can even think of Travis's interactions and fights against each individual boss to be like how Sumio's run-ins with these folks were almost always exclusive to that specific chapter. This also supports my thesis regarding the world of No More Heroes literally revolving around Travis, as this is plainly stated about Sumio in the world of Flower, Sun, and Rain. I don't know, I hope I gave some old Suda heads that love his early projects and hate everything he's made in the past 15 odd years a little extra room to rethink their notions about what they want and expect from Suda as a creative. That's just my opinion though. Let's have a little more fun with this lunacy. I've gathered various reviews and editorials for both of these games and picked out a bunch of quotes with little context. I even received old reviews from Japanese publications regarding the original Flower, Sun, and Rain on PS2, shout out to Adrian VG. Get ready viewer, you can play at home. It's up to you to figure out which one they're talking about, FSR or NMH3. 13 quote Kumite, here we go. The story isn't very deep, but that's made up by the sheer ridiculousness of all the characters. What's really apparent as you go around completing these mundane tasks is how empty it really is. Every area is sparsely populated and it honestly doesn't feel very lively at all. The world is just an obstacle between getting from one place to the next. The low-res environment textures just aren't pleasing to look at either. The game's soundtrack is stellar. You can hear the calming beach music as you explore. The regions feel half-baked and sterile. There's very little roaming around. The overworld is just a drag to explore. Considering the size of the maps, the way the buildings, cars, and people look, and the lack of activities and things to do, it isn't very effective. I think what the game does best is completely and wholeheartedly embrace its aesthetic. The game's charm is a lot more hit or miss, especially when it comes to traversing the map, which is empty, ugly. Each chapter of the game follows this same formula. Maps are barren of life and devoid of activity and variety, a desolate and dull game graphically. Why the gameplay so empty? If you're a binary thinking monkey who enjoys lol so random type humor, then you will probably clap your hands on the funny things / pretty colors on screen. Alright, are you ready for the results? Drum roll please. All of them were No More Heroes 3. Every single one. The points don't matter. Thanks for playing. You know, something I never gave much thought until writing this video. What does Flower, Sun, and Rain mean? Like the title itself. I guess these elements aptly describe the tropical resort, right? So it's fitting in that way. But is there more to it? Los Pas was a self-described paradise, a beautiful tropical island where you can get away from your troubles, let the beautiful plant life and blazing star enrich you. Oh my god, I'm really tired. Let the beautiful plant life and blazing star enrich you with rest and relaxation. That's what nearly all of these parties involved desired. To get away from their quandaries, their responsibilities, their lives. But we haven't gotten the whole title figured out. What about rain? I don't recall any gloomy forecasts during my stay at Los Pas. I think that's where Sumio comes in. He rains on their parade, so to speak. While that idiom is typically used in a negative sense, Sumio really was just doing what was best for these folks in order for them to either kill their past, get their lives back in motion, or both. He snaps them to reality however he can. I think that's the significance of the title. A game, a story, an experience that reminded me of what makes us people, what makes us individuals. It's not just our successes, but our own failures too. Our points of enlightenment, our insecurities, our everything. Like the Silver Case, Flower, Sun, and Rain tries to describe to us what it means to kill the past, but the characters and their actions show us that it's not as easy as saying it, that our past and our history tends to follow us wherever we go. But what else can we do besides look ahead and keep moving forward? Don't walk, run. So, what is there after this? Technically Killer 7, but I've already done a pretty thorough analysis on the game in both a political and narrative sense. I mentioned that Killer 7 had connections with the Silver Case as well as this game, but I think it's worth reiterating here. Sundance Shot was supposed to make an appearance in Killer 7, but he ended up being completely omitted. I think it's fair to say that Suda wanted this character to be a connecting point between his games, considering he was also a part of the character chart in the Silver Case, despite not appearing in that game either. And even then, he wouldn't make another official appearance until Travis Strikes Again nearly 20 years later, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't make sense, but, you know, forget about consistency already. There's also Ito's appearance near the end of the game. While it was most likely just a winking nod to Flower, Sun, and Rain, him working at Union Hotel, the heart of this brainwashing experiment, having connections with Elbow, is something that makes some contextual sense. I know when it came to this game's initial release, the creators involved considered it to be a completely separate world from the rest of the Grasshopper library, something that Suda has clearly gotten more relaxed about as years went by. And even then, he seems to have always considered the games he directed to share a universe through mostly ambiguous connections. Flower, Sun, and Rain is just an incredible experience. I see this game as the likes of Suda and Uka take on an insane challenge where they can provide an intriguing and unique narrative using the polar opposite of what already worked for them, down to the Silver Case's emphasis on the moon being mostly omitted for the bright sun, forming this fantastic yin-yang duology between these two titles. Their first two original games, and from what I can tell, this was a deeply enlightening challenge for Suda as a writer and director, and I'm happy to see how much of it would affect his projects henceforth.
In the beginning, I had the desire to create something completely different to the Silver Case, but I was a little shocked by how incredibly different it ended up. I thought to myself, no one is going to understand this game, are they? I thought that I really made a deeply mysterious game. We made a game we could really be proud of. We created something that felt very peculiar. I thought we made something strange that I'd never experienced in any other game.
Well, I hope you had fun in this absurd sunny vacation, because next time we're going back to Japan, into the deepest, blackest heart of a utopian dystopia once again. Please join me next time when I probably lose my mind attempting to analyze the 25th Ward. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my thorough analysis video on Flower, Sun, and Rain. As always, if you enjoy my stuff, please check out my Patreon and consider subscribing. Any amount is greatly appreciated. I'm trying to be more active on my socials as well, so follow me on there if you'd like. I'm pretty much on everything. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and I'll see you later.